When we return to the Han tribe, I'll plant lots and lots of horse grass for you and our children, and weave more hemp cloth for the tribe. I'm really good at it. Mu taught me everything herself. Xiao Dai continued murmuring until she fell asleep on top of you, while you were still pondering the major challenges facing the tribe's development. The Han tribe had just welcomed over 550 new members. By the end of the month, the Yu tribe would send at least 100 more people. The total population of the Han tribe was about to surpass the 1,000 mark. Continuing with the previous loose management system was no longer feasible. The Han tribe needed reforms. Previously, the Han tribe had only around 300 people, with members from just 4 tribes. Now, the population had suddenly surged to over 1,000, and the members' origins had become much more diverse, with people from over a dozen tribes. The most urgent tasks for the Han tribe now were establishing surnames, prohibiting marriage within the same clan, implementing a household registration system, arranging different public duties, and establishing a clear class hierarchy to facilitate management. Most importantly, they needed to form a strong military force. All these matters made your head spin. Finally, you shook your head and decided to let it go. Any reforms would have to wait until you returned to implement them. For now, the priority was to win this battle. You twisted your stiff neck, picked up an animal hide, and covered both yourself and Xiao Dai before drifting off into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, as dawn was just breaking, Xiao Dai lay on top of you, lost in a sweet dream, when she suddenly felt someone playing with her hair. The back of her neck felt warm, as if someone was kissing her. But you were right beside her. So who was kissing her neck from behind? When she slowly turned her head, she suddenly saw a large, wet, long nose swaying above her. There's a monster in the shack. Xiao Dai screamed in fright, pulling you up abruptly and hiding behind you while shaking uncontrollably. You rubbed your sleepy eyes and saw Robao standing at the entrance of the shack, looking utterly adorable as it licked its nose. Turning to Xiao Dai, you explained that this was the Han tribe's mascot. It only ate grass and wouldn't bite people. Xiao Dai, still hiding behind you, nodded nervously. But the next moment, you suddenly felt something moving behind you as well. Turning around to look, you saw something on the wall of the shack behind you. A large hole had already been torn open, and another long, identical trunk was pulling grass from the shed and stuffing it into its mouth. You turned your head to look. He slapped his own forehead. Damn, these guys really don't let a single blade of grass go to waste. They already ate my grass skirt, and now they're munching on my grass hut. By the time Xiao Dai came out of the hut with you, Robao and Huishan were already having breakfast on the hut itself. These two were growing bigger and bigger, and their appetites were starting to worry you. Seeing that these two goofballs were actually just eating grass, Xiao Dai wasn't as scared as before. She circled around them, curiously eyeing your two pets. Meanwhile, you went to find De Li, who was on guard duty. Today, you instructed the tribesmen to set up more grass huts on the hilltop facing Tuogu Ridge, disguising them as a settlement. The more huts, the better. It didn't matter if they could actually house people. When the time came to set them on fire, you wanted the hillside below to be clearly illuminated by a sea of flames. De Li scratched his head, grunted in acknowledgement, and hurried off to gather people and get to work. And so, under your direction, everyone began preparations, determined to wipe out the incoming enemies in one fell swoop. Meanwhile, dozens of kilometers away to the northeast of the Fire Tribe, a man named Yufu was leading a group of nearly 100 people on the move. Of this group of less than 100, over 50 were tribesmen from his own tribe, while the remaining 30 or so were wildlings gathered from various places. They had just taken in 6 women, 1 old and 5 young, all of whom had been abandoned by their tribes. Suddenly, a man named Yu Yi asked in confusion, "Big brother, aren't we heading toward the Tu tribe? Wasn't their tribe wiped out by the Fire Tribe?" "No, there must still be survivors. I've seen signs of life there." After marching for another hour or so, the group finally arrived at the foot of a cliff. The area had been burned to ashes, and the ground was dotted with grave mounds. At a glance, there were 40 or 50 of them. Among the graves, one stood out as freshly built. In front of it, 2 branches were stuck into the ground, each bearing a fresh human head. Other graves nearby also had branches with heads attached. A careful count revealed 9 heads in total, 7 of which had already dried out. It was impossible to tell how long they had been there. "See? I knew there were still survivors," Yufu said to his brother, pointing at the graves. Then he turned and shouted into the empty clearing, "Shue Tu! Come out! I know you're still alive." As soon as the words left his mouth, there was a rustling sound from a nearby tree. Suddenly, a burly man nearly 1.85 meters tall leaped down from the branches. He wore a tigerskin loincloth, and a scar about a foot long stretched across the bulging muscles of his chest. His long, unkempt hair covered his face, making him look like a madman. Only the 2-meter-long wooden club in his hand seemed out of place with his disheveled appearance. It was the weapon passed down through generations of 2 tribe chieftains. "What do you want from me?" the man named Xue rasped hoarsely. "I'm alone now. I have nothing to trade with you." "But you still have yourself," Yu Fu replied. "A tribe has asked me for people. You're young and alone. Why not join a tribe?" "I'm not going anywhere. My woman, my 2 children, and all my tribesmen lie here. I won't rest until I've slaughtered every last member of the tiger tribe to avenge them." Yu Fu didn't give up and continued persuading him. "But you're just one man. No matter how strong you are, how can you take on an entire tribe alone? The tribe I'm talking about has hundreds of people and powerful weapons. Join them first. If you can convince the whole tribe to help you seek revenge, then you might stand a chance against the fire tribe." Xue was taken aback by these words. Yu Fu's words made some sense. After all, he was just one man, an assassin, and if he wanted to wipe out an entire clan, he would need a large number of people. So he asked Yu Fu, "The tribe of several hundred people you mentioned, how powerful are their weapons? Can they defeat the fire tribe's living axes?" "I won't tell you. If you want to go, you'll have to come with me. I plan to trade you and your people for goods from their tribe." Yu Fu spoke bluntly, not caring whether Blood Disciple might overthink it. And indeed, Blood Disciple showed no reaction. He already knew Yu Fu wouldn't leave without a reason. This tribe never acted without a motive. Then Yu Fu went on boasting about the Han tribe, from their bows and arrows to their spears, and from their mischievousness to the White Rock. Blood Disciple couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. After some thought, his attitude began to soften slightly. "Even if I have to marry you, it must wait until I bring my clansmen back. I can't abandon them." Yu Fu, seeing Blood Disciple's resolute expression, gritted his teeth in frustration, thinking to himself, "Then why the hell am I even talking to you?" He spat out a sentence before turning to leave. "I have a time limit for recruiting. If you want to come, you'd better hurry." After walking a few steps, he turned back and added with a grin, "If you manage to bring your clansmen back, you can join my Yubilo then. Finding a new woman and starting a life would be better than living as a savage here." After Yubilo left, Blood Disciple stood alone in the graveyard, clenching his fists silently. Though he deeply desired to join the tribe Yu Fu had described, he couldn't bring himself to abandon his own people. Picking up the 2 fresh human heads, he quietly gripped his wooden club and set off on another hunting journey. Soon, he arrived again at the dumping ground where the fire tribe had disposed of their dead. He climbed a tree to observe the fire tribe from above and quickly noticed something unusual. The fire tribe was gathering for battle, with what looked like over 260 people, each carrying several bundles wrapped in sweet potato skins. The captured women and children were all driven back into the caves, guarded by nearly 50 adult men at the entrance. Blood Disciple knew exactly what the fire tribe was up to. Another tribe was about to suffer the same misfortune as his. After a brief consideration, he made a decision. He would follow the fire tribe. First, to seize the chance to kill a few and avenge his clansmen. Second, to find out the fire tribe's target. Once they were close to their destination, he would circle ahead to warn the targeted tribe and completely sabotage the fire tribe's plans. And so, the fire tribe marched forward with their large force, completely unaware that a bitter assassin, filled with hatred, was stealthily trailing them, determined to make their mission fail. Driven by his burning hatred, Blood Disciple followed the fire tribe for several days. When they were just 1 day's journey from Tugu Ridge, he finally grew impatient. Who the hell is the fire tribe going to attack? They've come so far. He decided to settle his own score first. Late at night, Blood Disciple hid in the forest, waiting for his targets. The method was the same simple, brutal assassination. 2 men who had wandered into the woods to relieve themselves were struck down with his club before they could make a sound, their brains splattering like arrows. After succeeding, Blood Disciple followed his usual routine. He fled quickly. It wasn't long before the night watch discovered the scene, only to find 2 headless corpses once again. Guoli flew into a rage. That bastard actually followed us all the way here. How audacious! He immediately roused the entire tribe, and they set out with torches in the middle of the night to search for the culprit. But Blood Disciple had long since escaped. How could they just wait to be found? The warriors who returned empty-handed without finding any martial arts secrets only fueled Li's rage further. The soldier who reported the situation to him ended up suffering the consequences, directly becoming the scapegoat for Li's anger and getting brutally beaten. In the end, he was even executed by being burned alive as a human lantern. Normally, even when angry, Li wouldn't have been this furious. But he never expected the Han tribe to have traveled for so many days and still not arrived. He had long grown impatient. Then he roared, "How much farther until we get there?" A subordinate stammered, "Ella leader, it's not much farther. Just one more day's journey and we'll be there. There's a hillside I didn't dare climb, afraid they might spot us." "Smoke and fire," the leader repeated viciously under his breath. "One more day. Just one more." One day, meanwhile, you in the Han tribe weren't idle either. At that moment, you were leading your clansmen at Tugu Ridge, testing the range of the bows and arrows. You stood at the preset archer position, drew the longbow to its full extent, and shot an arrow down the slope. The arrow finally landed about 350 meters away. Xiao Dai watched curiously beside you, not knowing what you were planning. You explained to him that when the enemy charged up, once they crossed the marked line where the arrows landed, they would be within bow range, and then it would be time to strike. You then shot several more arrows, forming a horizontal line. This was the range marker line. Soon after, Beasttooth led a group carrying bronze shovels and straw coated with lime, placing straw men at the landing points. To most people, it would just look like some strange blockade, not suspecting it was a marker. By noon, all 117 people on Pogu Ridge were ready. You didn't deploy cavalry. Instead, you had all clansmen who could shoot arrows dismount and join the battle formation. If only there were bows suitable for mounted archery, like composite bows or crossbows, then you wouldn't have to worry about a shortage of archers. Just then, a scout who had been tailing the Fire tribe noticed something unusual. The Fire tribe usually ate only 2 meals a day, morning and evening, but today they stopped to eat at noon. The scout realized they might have reached their destination. The Fire tribe was preparing to attack. So, he circled around from the outskirts, moving ahead of the Fire tribe to deliver a warning. He followed the markers and ran for nearly 4 hours before finally spotting the row of white straw men. On the hilltop, you were leisurely eating your meal when suddenly a sentry clansman rushed over to report that someone had come with a message. You were puzzled, this wasn't part of the plan, but you still led your people to the edge of the hilltop to meet the scout. After some questioning, you allowed him to come up the hill, though you secretly ordered your clansmen to keep an eye on him. The scout urged you to flee quickly, saying the Fire tribe had 3 times as many people as the Han tribe. He didn't want the Han tribe to be wiped out like his own tribe had been. But you firmly told him that you wouldn't run and that he should just stay put and watch the show. Though you appeared to be just a child, your commanding presence instantly won the scout over. He had no choice but to wait quietly. A little over an hour later, as the sun slowly set, the Fire tribe piled dry firewood at the base of the slope, preparing to create smoke. Seeing this, you showed no fear, calmly ordering your clansmen to light the fires. A dozen or so clansmen, holding torches, quickly set over 100 straw huts ablaze. In an instant, flames shot skyward. Hua Li, seeing the raging fire on the hilltop, thought they had already succeeded and excitedly shouted for his clansmen to charge in with him, declaring that the white rocks, the clay, and the women would all be theirs. The next moment, the Fire tribe members, each holding a torch and 2 spears, charged upward. They soon reached a point 50 meters from the white straw men. Hua Li even yelled to burn the Han tribe's totem dwellings, which were actually just those straw men, quickly ignited by flaming stone axes, turning into even clearer range markers. But they had no idea they were marching to their doom. You watched as the Fire tribe charged to within 10 meters of the straw men and immediately ordered your clansmen to raise their longbows and shoot. Before the first volley of arrows even landed, 3 consecutive volleys were fired. From 350 meters away, the dense arrows flew toward the Fire tribe like locusts. Many of their people were bare-chested and had no shields for defense. Just the first volley of 115 arrows killed or wounded over 50 people. Some were hit by 2 or 3 arrows and died on the spot, while others were struck in the arms or legs, immediately losing their ability to fight. They were utterly stunned. Some thought they were being punished by the gods for burning the Han tribe's straw men. Hua Li tried to rally his clansmen to keep charging, but then the second volley of 115 arrows arrived. Warriors who had just helped each other up were struck down again. The 4 previously wounded archers were hit again by arrows, this time completely unable to stand. Some who had dodged the first wave of arrows surrendered, but the wounded were also shot dead. When the 3rd wave of arrows arrived, the fire tribe grew even more panicked. They tried to flee backward, but you had no intention of letting them escape. Immediately, you ordered your tribesmen to unleash 5 consecutive volleys. Hearing this, your people grew excited and shot their arrows with all their might. The fire tribe, which originally had 260 members, was reduced to fewer than 50 intact warriors and fewer than 30 merchants after these volleys. They scrambled and crawled, retreating farther into the grasslands. Huoli, who had been shot in the leg and hit an artery, trailed behind the fleeing group, an arrow embedded in his thigh preventing him from speeding up. Huoli was a tough man. He forcibly yanked the arrow out. Unexpectedly, the barbed tip tore through his artery. He collapsed after just a few steps and stopped breathing. You led your tribesmen in pursuit, ordering them to shoot arrows at opportune moments as you ran. You didn't stop until most of the fleeing fire tribe members were killed. Xianxia, who had followed you all the way, was stunned at the sight of the corpses and arrows scattered everywhere. He had never imagined these short arrows could be so deadly. You instructed your tribesmen to clean up the battlefield, retrieve the arrows, and pile up the bodies for burial the next day. Xianxia brought a few arrows to you and expressed his desire to join the Han tribe. You didn't give him a direct answer, as you still couldn't fully trust what he had previously said about the fire tribe. You decided to wait until you confirmed the information with the fire tribe youths before making a decision. Hearing that you had fire tribe survivors, Xianxia grew hopeful about joining the Han tribe. Soon, Xia came to report the results of the battlefield cleanup. 248 bodies in total, with several dozen arrows still missing. It was too dark to search further, so you waved your hand and ordered everyone to withdraw, leaving the rest for the next day. Meanwhile, Xiaodai waited anxiously on the hilltop. You had forbidden her from joining the chase earlier. Only when she saw you return safely with the tribesmen did she finally relax. After the intense battle and cleanup, everyone was exhausted. Following your orders, they all went to rest. You summoned Xia and instructed him to prepare food for the 30 youths, ensuring they ate their fill. The next morning, they would dig graves and bury their own tribesmen. Early the next day, the youths, who had just eaten a full meal for the first time in days, set to work. Seeing their fellow tribesmen who had come to attack the Han tribe lying dead, they were both shocked and regretful for having listened to Li's advice and causing this disaster. Once the graves were dug, you stood before them and delivered a speech. You were all redeemed by the Han tribe with white salt, and you even found wives at the spring festival. You could have lived well in the Han tribe. Now the fire tribe is finished. Do you want to die in this pit with your tribesmen, or join the Han tribe, live with your women and raise children? The choice is yours. Without hesitation, the youths immediately cried out, begging to join the Han tribe. Since you choose to live, I have a few questions for you, you said. How many settlements does the fire tribe have? Where are they? How many women and children are there? Eagerly, the youths competed to share everything they knew, afraid that any delay would lead to their execution. From them, you learned that the fire tribe still had about 50 men, with the rest being women and children, roughly over 1,000 people. You decided to bring those women and children back, even though they would be a burden. But watching so many children starve to death is something you cannot bear. Next, everyone spent the entire morning packing their belongings. After half a day of travel, they finally returned to the Han tribe settlement by evening. The Han tribe had undergone significant changes. Newcomers now lived in pointed-roof thatched huts outside the walls, surrounded by simple fences. In the evening, all the tribespeople ate together. Big Tree reported the situation to you. During this period, everyone's life had been normal, and the newcomers were all finding tasks they were good at. Members from the Gu and Wen tribes joined the gathering team and discovered some new edible plants, as well as a deep red plant dye. You named this plant beauty grass, and mentally noted that it could be used for dyeing in the future. Youngsters from the Cha and Ao tribes joined the fishing team, bringing back a considerable catch of fish every day. Members of the Bu and Thorn tribes, however, developed an interest in carpentry. Upon learning that the carts were your creation, they instantly became your admirers. The Shui and Lian tribes also found work that interested them. The Shui tribe engaged in pottery making and brick firing, while the Lian tribe learned the art of refining wild ores. The Zhu tribe discovered a new material for sugar production, the roots and sap of the man-eating tree, which could be processed into brown sugar. Some youths from other tribes joined the hunting team, but you felt that relying solely on hunting was unsustainable. With the Han tribe's large population, the animals in the nearby forests would eventually be depleted. In the future, they should focus on capturing live herbivores for domestication. Additionally, the domesticated rabbits were reproducing rapidly, with over 500 already, and their numbers were expected to multiply exponentially this year. Soon, there would be no shortage of animal hides. After hearing Big Tree's report, you immediately called a meeting with the Han tribe's leadership to discuss the tribe's next steps. Shu Wu was the first to speak. There are too many newcomers now. The caves can't accommodate everyone, and the thatched huts aren't suitable for heating. If this continues, many won't survive the winter. The elder echoed this concern, adding, "We also need to stockpile food and winter hides early." Xue Tu then offered, "I'm willing to lead the way and bring back the entire population of the Tiger tribe, over 1,000 people." Everyone felt a headache coming on. With the tribe already overcrowded, adding another 1,000 people would mean even fierce competition for the barest necessities. But you simply smiled. Most of them are children. Though they may not be of much help in daily tasks, they don't eat much either. As long as everyone works diligently, we can support them. You then laid out a detailed plan. First, expand the rabbit pens to increase the scale of breeding. Organize more people for fishing, while reducing the number of hunters. Hunting should rely more on traps, with only a few people checking them daily to save labor. The freed-up manpower should focus on logging, digging canals, and firing bricks in preparation for building houses. Additionally, more irrigation channels should be dug for paddy fields to cultivate more rice. The carpentry and metallurgy teams should prioritize toolmaking, producing more axes for logging and shovels for digging. The next morning, you assembled a team of 100 people to attack the Fire tribe. To minimize resistance from the children, you intentionally included 10 women skilled in archery in the team. Led by Shuda, with Ya as the deputy and K2 guiding the way, the team was also equipped with swift stonehorn deer for emergency messengers to ride back and report. Everyone was required to return before the end of the month. The team set off immediately on their deer, while you continued assigning tasks to the rest of the tribe. The gathering team was to collect more vines for making baskets and preparing materials for canal digging and wall construction. The youths from the Xue tribe were sent to dig pits by the river to build fish ponds, where surplus live fish could be stored as emergency reserves. Currently, there was only one brick kiln. The efficiency of brickmaking is too low this way, so next we need to build 2 more brick kilns. Ren Bingdazui and Mutong were appointed as the leaders of the metallurgy and carpentry groups, respectively. The two collaborated to first make tools and then produce manpower-driven carts. Xiao Dai, seeing that everyone had tasks, hurried over to ask what she should do next. After thinking for a moment, you told her to go plant horsegrass and propagate it by cuttings once the tender shoots grew, aiming to expand the planting area this year. Xiao Dai was eager to weave cloth, but since the horsegrass hadn't grown yet, she had no choice but to follow your instructions. Once all the work was assigned, it was time to focus on the most important matter. You called the elder and the shaman aside separately and explained the ideas of household division and name changes. The 2 old men looked utterly confused, having no idea what you were talking about. You patiently explained. Household division means that every adult man, along with his woman and children, would form a family. From then on, everyone must have a surname and a given name. A surname represents a tribe or clan, and men and women with the same surname cannot marry until 6 generations have passed. Since most of the tribe's population came from different tribes, people could find partners within the tribe as long as they didn't share the same surname. You emphasized that this wasn't about splitting up the main tribe but allowing each man to have his own hut and live with his family, ensuring the purity of the bloodline. Boys, upon reaching adulthood, must establish their own households, find a woman to start a family, and care for their parents in old age, just as their parents had cared for them when they were young. Additionally, you established a tribal rule. Once a family is formed, neither men nor women are allowed to engage in extramarital affairs. Violators would be demoted to slaves for life. Men sent to mine, women tasked solely with bearing children. That evening, the 3 of you announced this to the tribe. Though the people didn't fully understand, they trusted that what you said was right. The task of implementing household division was handed over to the elder, while you took charge of assigning names. You provided the surnames, and individuals would use their original names combined with the new surnames. Afterward, you and Dashu began preparations for building houses, measuring the land and marking boundaries. As you worked, You explained the housing plan to Dashu. Each house would cover an area of 10 meters in length and width, with 3 rooms in total, one for the adults, one for the children, and a central area for cooking and grilling. A small storage shed could also be built for firewood and tools, and a pit for making adobe bricks could be dug nearby. To build brick houses, one must first dig trenches for the foundation, then use bricks and mortar to construct the walls. Large beams would support the roof, which would be layered with grass, mud, and tiles. During the midday break, Xiaodai brought you a white thread, excitedly claiming it was spun from rabbit fur. You were surprised and asked where the rabbit fur came from. Xiaodai said the rabbit had bitten it off its own belly. You quickly explained that it was a mother rabbit preparing a nest for her young. Fortunately, the weather was warm, so the baby rabbits should be fine. Xiaodai still insisted on wanting to weave cloth, mentioning that she had tried plucking wool from an alpaca, but the alpaca spat at her. You couldn't help but laugh at the silly girl and promised to make scissors to shear the alpaca's wool for her to weave. Later, you spent 3 days carefully crafting a pair of scissors. The scissors consisted of 2 triangular blades, one side flat, the other convex, with a fixed round hole in the middle and slender copper strips at the handles. After casting, they were polished, riveted with copper nails, and the edges were finely sharpened. Xiaodai was overjoyed when she received the scissors and happily went to collect alpaca wool. You smiled and turned to inspect the 2 newly built brick kilns, the foundation for all the work to come. After all, building houses would require a steady supply of bricks, and the soil excavated from the river was an essential raw material for brickmaking. To complete the houses as quickly as possible, you had to keep a close watch on the progress of these 2 tasks. Fortunately, with everyone's collective efforts over the past few days, 2 new brick kilns had been completed, and the river excavation work was progressing steadily. The newly integrated tribesmen had now lived in the Han tribe for nearly half a month. They watched as the tribe transformed day by day, all under the leadership of their chief, whom they couldn't help but revere as a divine figure. At the same time, they felt immense pride in being members of the Han tribe. No matter which tribe they had belonged to before, none could have provided them with a pottery vessel for each person or ensured they had enough to eat at every meal. Most importantly, the white smoke that once plagued them was now gone, something they had never dared to dream of before. To free yourself from these daily tasks, you gathered a few intelligent tribesmen and began teaching them the skills of housebuilding step by step. Once they mastered the craft, you would have more time to focus on other matters. Meanwhile, Shuda led a 100-strong expeditionary force, stealthily approaching the chaotic burial island. From a distance, they observed the situation in the fire tribe. The night was already pitch black. The 50 men of the fire tribe remained unaware that their main force had been completely wiped out, and the few warriors who had fled were nowhere to be found. The women and children of the tribe were confined in a natural cave with a narrow entrance, barely wide enough for 2 people to stand side by side. Only 5 unsuspecting men guarded the cave, sitting around a bonfire at the entrance, roasting rat meat for a late-night snack. The remaining 45 men were busy in their thatched huts or tents, preoccupied with procreation. Various sounds echoed from the huts. After carefully assessing the situation, Shuda and his team sprang into action. Concerned that the darkness would hinder the effectiveness of their bows and arrows, Shuda ordered Shoya to take 10 men and 10 women, each armed with a bow, and quietly position themselves at the foot of the hill. Their task was to unleash a volley of arrows at the men guarding the cave entrance. Shuda estimated that, with fewer than 10 guards, 3 rounds of arrows from 20 archers would be enough to eliminate them. Once the guards were dealt with, they would storm the cave. Shoya nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Xuetu followed Shuda, leading the remaining men in pairs to infiltrate the huts and eliminate the occupants. Since the people inside were asleep, bows and arrows were impractical. It was better to catch them off guard and strike directly. Shuda quietly slipped into one of the tents, where a fire tribe man was on top of a woman. Silently, Shuda drew a bronze axe from his waist, crept up behind the man, and swung the axe down as the man turned his head. The blow shattered the man's skull, splattering blood and brain matter all over the woman. The man's body, however, remained stuck on the axe. Shuda had to brace his foot against the man's face to wrench the axe free before turning to check on the others. Xuetu, in another hut, was even more ruthless. He charged in and delivered a single blow with his club, shattering the target's skull. From entry to the target's death, it took less than 3 seconds. The woman pinned beneath the corpse had no time to react before Xuetu moved on. In yet another hut, a young tribesman with tied-back hair had just entered when the man inside sidestepped his spear thrust, pinned him down and began choking him. Fortunately, a woman in the hut intervened, grabbing the man's short spear, while the young man's companion arrived just in time, driving a spear into the man's chest. Blood sprayed everywhere. Amid the chaos, some women screamed in terror. A few Fire Tribe men, hearing the commotion, grabbed their weapons and engaged in fierce combat with the Han tribe youths. Casualties mounted on both sides. In one cramped hut, a young tribesman found his spear too unwieldy to wield effectively, and was severely wounded by an enemy's strike, collapsing to the ground. Luckily, Shuda arrived in time to save him. Meanwhile, the guards at the cave entrance on the hillside heard the noise and were still discussing it when Xianxia and his 20 archers reached a position about 100 meters to their side. Xianxia signaled for his archers to form an arc, knocked their arrows and shouted, "Fire!" The twang of bowstrings and the whistle of arrows cutting through the rain filled the air. 21 arrows flew toward the warriors at the cave entrance. Illuminated by the firelight, the 5 men were completely exposed. In an instant, 3 were struck by multiple arrows and died. One took a severe hit to the arm, while another was shielded by his companion's corpse and avoided injury. Just as the man with the wounded arm cried out, the second volley of mounted archers arrived. The remaining 2 were riddled with arrows like hedgehogs. Still uneasy, the attackers ordered 2 more volleys, turning the corpses into pincushions before charging forward. There was no resistance from above. They smoothly took control of the cave entrance's defenses and waved torches to signal their shadows on the slope below. The battle downhill soon ended. Shuda called for his tribesmen to drag out the bodies and count them. All 45 members of the Fire Tribe were eliminated. On Shuda's side, 1 was dead, 1 severely wounded, and 2 lightly injured. The severely wounded was a Fire Tribe captive, his collarbone shattered and flesh torn open. He wasn't expected to survive. In this battle, 2 were lost, 50 enemies killed, and over 1,000 women and children captured. Just then, the women from the dwellings emerged, gathering together. A youth captured by the Fire Tribe said to them, "I was taken by the Fire Tribe. Now I've brought another tribe to rescue you. My chieftain attacked the Han tribe and was defeated. They're all dead. You can come with us to Hanbilu." Some of the women, sharp-eyed, recognized the youth. The bolder ones asked if it was true. The youth insisted, "It's true. Our tribe has no men left. We've taken the cave. You can bring your children out." Hearing they could retrieve their children, the women hurried toward the cave. The Han tribe members followed, leaving only the wounded and Shuda behind. Shuda sent the wounded man's companion to the cave, then knelt beside the injured man and asked if there was anything he needed. The man wept, saying he didn't want to die, that his tribe had been defeated by the Fire Tribe. He'd barely survived to join the Han tribe, and he'd found a woman to build a life with. Shuda sighed, patted his shoulder, and promised to care for his woman. Then he snapped the man's neck, granting him a swift death, before turning toward the cave. Halfway up the slope, some women in the cave who hadn't been sleeping heard the commotion and tried to slip away in the chaos. But as soon as they peered out, they saw the guards slain by arrows and were so terrified by 2 more volleys that they collapsed to the ground. One heavily pregnant woman tried to flee, but another, holding a child with a slightly rounded belly, said running was useless. They were pregnant, with children to raise, they couldn't survive as outcasts. The women froze at this, squatting down in despair. They knew they needed men. Pregnancy left them vulnerable, unable to protect themselves. Then, the female archers from the slope approached, deliberately positioned there. They reached the cave entrance, kicked the dead aside, and collected the arrows. Undamaged ones were placed in quivers. Broken ones taken back to recast the arrowheads. The women in the cave saw that their attackers were women and had actually won, their eyes widening in shock. The women cleaning the battlefield smiled at those inside. The smile felt kind to the pregnant women at the entrance. One woman holding a child stood up, her voice trembling as she asked an archer, "Which tribe are you from? Can you take me with you? I can twist rope and tan hides. I'm heavy with child now, but once it's born, I can do anything. Will you take me?" She believed a tribe with female warriors was strong, able to withstand attacks, and that women in such a tribe likely held decent status. If they could fight, they could hunt too. Such a tribe could protect her, so she wanted to join. The female warrior didn't quite understand her words but stepped aside, gesturing for them to come out. The woman with the child thanked her hastily, supporting her belly as she walked out. The others followed. Dozens of women from below rushed up, followed by Han tribe warriors. A woman excitedly shouted to her sisters, "We can go!" After those boys brought people to rescue us, our chieftain was killed by the Han tribe, and the men at the foot of the mountain were also wiped out. Our tribe has no men left. We can join the main force of the Han tribe. A young man who had previously come from the Fire tribe said, "Go and tell these women, we will take them to the Han tribe. They won't be controlled, and there will be food to eat. They will work and live like the women of the tribe, and children will not be harmed. Tell them to follow us tomorrow." The young man nodded in assurance and began searching for his own relatives first. Other young men also looked for their families. After finding them, they wept and shared their sorrows. Then, they spread the word among the crowd, urging the women to join the Han tribe. The women asked many questions about the Han tribe. How many men are there? Is there enough food to eat? What kind of work do they do every day? Will they mistreat women? When they learned that the Han tribe could make many water containers, had an endless supply of white salt, raised livestock, and even tamed wild beasts for labor, and that women weren't confined just to bear children, everyone had their own tasks, they immediately agreed to join. Even though they knew the journey would take 7 days, they were determined to go. Fangtooth walked over to Shuda and asked the captain, "Upgrade plan. How do we take so many people with us?" Shuda looked at the pregnant women and children. "Feeling after those boys brought people to rescue us, our chieftain was killed by the Han tribe, and the men at the foot of the mountain were also wiped out. Our tribe has no men left. We can join the main force of the Han tribe." A young man who had previously come from the Fire tribe said, "Go and tell these women, we will take them to the Han tribe. They won't be controlled, and there will be food to eat. They will work and live like the women of the tribe, and children will not be harmed. Tell them to follow us tomorrow." The young man nodded in assurance and began searching for his own relatives first. Other young men also looked for their families. After finding them, they wept and shared their sorrows. Then, they spread the word among the crowd, urging the women to join the Han tribe. The women asked many questions about the Han tribe. How many men are there? Is there enough food to eat? What kind of work do they do every day? Will they mistreat women? When they learned that the Han tribe could make many water containers, had an endless supply of white salt, raised livestock, and even tamed wild beasts for labor, and that women weren't confined just to bear children, everyone had their own tasks, they immediately agreed to join. Even though they knew the journey would take 7 days, they were determined to go. Fangtooth walked over to Shuda and asked the captain, "How do we take so many people with us?" Shuda looked at the pregnant women and children, feeling troubled. "First, let's clean up and see what we can take with us. Look for animal hides, food, and baskets or anything that can carry things. If there's no other way, we'll carry the baskets and help them with the children. If only we had a few ox carts." Fangtooth nodded, as there was no better solution. Immediately, everyone searched the entire settlement. Usable animal hides and dried meat were all taken. They even burned all the fire rats raised by the Fire tribe to use as provisions. Early the next morning, Shuda used the dismantled thatched huts to cremate the 2 young men who had died in battle. Then, he led over 1,200 women and children on the return journey. Among the 1,200 people, there were over 470 adult women, nearly 300 of whom were pregnant, and the rest were children. They wrapped the children in animal hides, tying them with ropes or vines, either carrying them on their backs or holding them in their arms. The Han tribe warriors also helped carry and hold the children. Little Deer carried a large basket on his back filled with dried meat and animal hides, which somewhat lightened the burden. The group began moving toward the Han tribe, leaving behind the Fire tribe settlement, now engulfed in flames. At the same time, in the Han tribe, day had just broken. Big Tree set out with the 20 men assigned by Luochong. 10 of them rowed small wooden boats upstream, while Big Tree led the remaining 10, riding on foot deer, leading oxen and driving ox carts across the bridge. The ox carts were loaded with mining tools, hollow pottery rollers for road construction, and wooden buckets for water. The newly built 3-meter-wide bridge was sturdy enough for the loaded ox carts to cross without issue. Big Tree's task was to lead the team in finding a flat, wide enough path, marking the route along the way, and having the oxen pull the pottery rollers to compact the road over several years. Where there were pits, they would dig stones and soil and compact them again. However, maintaining such a dirt road was challenging. A heavy rain could turn it into a muddy mess. They traveled north along the eastern bank of the small river, avoiding the area where the Black Rat tribe had lived, as it was now abandoned. But the Li tribe, former neighbors of the Black Rat tribe, planned to visit the Black Rat tribe that day. The Li tribe had traded with the Black Rat tribe the previous winter. After learning to cook food, they had grown fond of it, but their supply of pottery was insufficient. So the chieftain, Mao Li, led a hunting party and a few newly adult girls to trade for pottery. They walked all day and arrived at the edge of the Black Rat tribe's settlement by evening. The scene before them sent chills down their spines. What had happened here? All around were charred remains, and some human bones burned black. Mao Li picked up a human bone and stood there lost in thought for a long time. Even if they were attacked by enemies, they couldn't have all died. Otherwise, no one would have been left to cremate the bodies. The Black Rat tribe must have been attacked and then moved elsewhere. With this thought, Mao Li led his tribesmen to search for clues. The new dwelling of the Black Rat tribe had cost them great effort. After much searching, they finally discovered traces of the Han tribe on a small hill to the north of the Black Rat tribe. That evening, the sunset dyed the sky crimson. In the western sky above the Black Rat tribe's settlement, 3 distinct plumes of smoke rose into the air, smoke from the 3 brick kilns the Han tribe had built by the small river. Mao Li recalled what the former chieftain had once said. From the Black Rat tribe, walk in the direction of the setting sun for a day's journey, and you'll find a small river. The Black Rat tribe's relocation couldn't have taken them too far. They were likely on the other side of that river. So, Mao Li decided to rest there for the night. The next morning, he sent one warrior back to the tribe to inform them that the Black Rat tribe's move would delay their return by 2 days. Meanwhile, he led the others westward to search for the Black Rat tribe. At the same time, Big Tree hid the small boat by the riverbank and led his men into the dark forest. Shuda, on the other hand, was guiding a team of over 1,000 people, struggling to advance toward the Han tribe. Back at the Han tribe, you were busy building houses. Just as you were teaching your tribesmen how to construct a 2-4 wall, Mao Li and his team arrived by the river. As soon as they reached the riverbank, they spotted the Han tribe's fishing team on the opposite shore, finishing up their work for the day. Seeing this, the women, thinking enemies had arrived, immediately grabbed their bronze spears and blocked the bridgehead, shouting repeatedly, "Enemies are here!" Hearing the shouts, the people digging the river nearby raised their bronze shovels and rushed toward the bridge. In less than 2 minutes, over 500 people had gathered at the bridgehead. Mao Li, seeing such a large crowd, was so frightened he turned and ran. At that moment, survival was far more important than mischief. However, someone from the Han tribe recognized Mao Li. Hurriedly, he called out to his former chieftain in the native tongue of the Li tribe. Mao Li froze in surprise, recognizing the man as someone he had traded to Shuda months earlier. But he was puzzled. Could this really be the Black Rat tribe? How had they grown so large so suddenly? A young man ran up to Mao Li and explained how he had been traded to the Han tribe by Shuda. He also mentioned that the pottery had originally come from the Han tribe. Earlier that spring, after the Black Rat tribe was attacked by enemies, they had joined the Han tribe. Now, the Black Rat tribe no longer existed. Only then did Mao Li realize he had been played for a fool. Shuda was truly a sly old fox. Still, he had come to trade for pottery. Now that he knew the goods originated from the Han tribe, he could trade with them directly. He asked the young man to lead the way to meet the Han tribe's chieftain. As they reached the bridgehead, they happened to run into Yu, who had hurried over upon hearing the commotion. The young man introduced Mao Li as the former chieftain of his tribe, here to trade for pottery. Your interest was immediately piqued. You had been sharpening your metaphorical 50-meter blade, just waiting for someone to deal with. You led the group into the tribe, with Mao Li and his men following closely behind. When Mao Li saw the numerous pots and jars scattered around the thatched huts, he could hardly contain his excitement. There were so many. With a wave of your hand, you had your tribesmen bring over the pottery and white salt, asking Mao Li what he wanted to trade for. Staring curiously at the bucket of white salt, Mao Li asked, "What is this? Can this be traded too?" You pinched a bit of the salt and placed it in his palm, explaining, "This is white salt. Eating it will give you more strength for work." Upon hearing this, Mao Li put all the salt in his hand into his mouth. The next moment, his brows furrowed tightly, yet the taste was something he had never experienced before. After letting the saltiness settle, he eagerly asked how the white salt could be traded. You took a small pottery bowl, filled it to the brim and said, "This much for one young girl. Any less, and the deal's off." Mao Li was stunned, thinking to himself, "This is downright robbery." But the white salt was truly a valuable find. For a moment he was torn. He wanted both the white salt and the pottery. But I don't have that many people to trade. So he cautiously asked Han, could I trade with something else? As long as I can get it, I'll find a way. You thought for a moment and said it wasn't impossible. Things like live grass-eating animals, delicious fruits and plant roots, seeds, and such could all be traded. Upon hearing this, Maoli immediately grew excited. Do chestnuts count? They're not only tasty but can also be stored for a long time. Before you could speak, the young man spoke up for you. Han, our tribe also has chestnuts, and they're even better now than what the chestnut tribe used to make. Hearing this, Maoli deflated like a punctured balloon. They have chestnuts too? Does that mean we can only trade with people now? Seeing this, you frowned and scrutinized the people of the Li tribe. Soon, the weapons in their hands caught your attention. Each of them held 2 short spears fitted with bone spearheads. The shafts were very straight, and when you took one to examine it closely, the entire short spear felt light and smooth to the touch. Though it lacked bark, the surface was a brownish color. Suddenly, a thought struck you, and you urgently confirmed with Maoli. Did this originally have light-colored bark? Does the tree grow many green fruits with several round pits inside, and have large, 3-pointed leaves? Maoli was stunned upon hearing this. It matched exactly what you described. But the fruit from that tree is poisonous. In the past, some tribesmen died from eating it. Now you were certain. It was definitely the same tree. You immediately told Maoli, I want this kind of tree. 1 tree for a large bowl of white salt. Maoli was very surprised. What do you want a poisonous tree for? Is it more valuable than people? If our tribe could make use of it, would it make the Li tribe as wealthy as the Han tribe? You saw through his cautious thoughts and promptly told him, in this world, only I know how to use this tree. In the hands of those who don't understand, it can only be used as firewood. Caught red-handed, Maoli could only force a smile. Then how should we bring it to you? Just chop it down. No, I want small, living trees. Dig them up from the roots, keep some soil attached, wrap the roots in soil with bark, and bring them to me. Also, I want the poisonous fruits they bear, as many as you can get. What? You want those poisonous fruits too? So you want the tree for the toxic fruits? What are they really for? Heh, no need to probe. It's the toxic fruits from the tree that I want. You can choose not to bring them to me, but then I'll lead my people to destroy your tribe and pick the fruits myself. You'd better think carefully. Oppose my tribe or trade those fruits for these good things. Hearing this, Maoli quickly denied any opposition. Of course, we'll trade the fruits. But it's really not easy to get that kind of tree here. Besides, I brought 8 women this time and still need to trade for something first. That was indeed a problem, but you quickly had someone bring 2 long-handled bronze axes and 2 bronze shovels, along with a bowl of white salt. Maoli had never seen such tools before and couldn't help but frown. Han, what are these things you're giving me? Can't you give some pottery instead? You took the bronze shovel and tools and personally showed him how to use them. See? With these 2 things, you'll be able to dig up many small trees quickly. Won't you have plenty of pottery and white salt then? Maoli was inwardly astonished. He hadn't expected the Han tribe to make even a simple tool so advanced. But he didn't waste time. After leaving the 8 girls, he took the bronze tools and left. Tong Axe led the warriors away. After Mao Li and his group had departed, Rat Shaman was the first to voice the question on his mind. What do you need the rotten trees and gambling fruits for? You smiled faintly and explained, that tree is the tongue tree, also known as the oil tongue. Although its fruits are inedible, they can be pressed for oil. The red oil can be used as a varnish on wooden surfaces, making them waterproof, moisture-resistant, and slowing decay. All the wooden items in our Sioux tribe can benefit from it. Eventually, every household's furniture will be coated with it. Moreover, the tongue tree is quite beautiful and can be planted along the main roads of the tribe as decorative trees. Additionally, tongue oil is flammable and can serve as fierce fire oil in urban attacks and defenses, an important strategic resource. Meanwhile, in a clearing on the eastern bank of the small river, Mao Li and his group had not traveled through the night to return. Instead, they gathered dry branches, lit a fire, and roasted some dried meat they had brought along. Mao Li held the gleaming golden long-handled axe, unable to put it down, while secretly calculating in his heart. With such valuable goods, the Han tribe can attract so many people. Although our Li tribe can't produce these fine items, we can trade useless trees and fruits for them. Then, by following Shuda's methods, we can exchange these acquired goods with other tribes. It won't be long before we become as powerful as the Han tribe. The surrounding warriors remained silent but nodded in unison. Their leader's reasoning was sound. However, they were unaware that Maoli had left one thought unspoken. First, work for the Han tribe, and once the Li tribe's strength rivals that of the Han tribe, he would lead his people to overthrow them. Then, all the production techniques for the Han tribe's valuable goods would be his, and his Li tribe would grow ever stronger. Early the next morning, Deshu's team was already very close to 8 Treasures Mountain. The Han tribe needed lime, so they had to move as quickly as possible. The 4 men assigned by Deshu to guard the wooden boats weren't idle either. They hunted wild rabbits near the small river, bringing fresh blood to the Han tribe's breeding rabbit population. On another front, Shuda led the main force of over 1,000 people, advancing with difficulty. They moved in stops and starts, having just crossed the boundary of Dream Valley. Children under 5 had to be carried by adults, and most of the pregnant women in the group didn't even have straw sandals. Some had worn their feet raw, and a few, already weak, had died along the way. Yet, everyone persevered, driven by the desire for a home, a place where they could rest peacefully when weary. Back in the Han tribe, construction teams led by the chief were busy building houses for the clansmen. After a day of bricklaying practice, the 14 wall builders had grown much more skilled. In just 2 days, they had raised the walls to 2.5 meters high, and it was estimated that the roof beams could be installed in another day. However, progress on the indoor facilities was slow, especially with the complex structure of the stove, particularly the challenging circular hearth. Another day passed. In the middle of the night, as you lay sound asleep in the grass hut with Xiao Dai in your arms, a night patrolling soldier suddenly called out, "Chief, wake up! A group of about 200 people has arrived outside, led by a man riding a horned beast." You immediately knew it was Yu Fu, bringing people to you. Quickly getting up, you stepped outside. By the time you reached the open urban area, hundreds of torches were already illuminating the scene. Ro and Huishan followed closely behind you. They had been helping dig the river these days while you were busy building houses, and it had been a long time since you had played together. In the open space of the city's square, stones and oil, Fu stood at the forefront with his corner beside him. Behind him were his 2 wives, each holding a child, followed by a large crowd. By the look of it, there were well over 20 people, including about 50 tribesmen from the Oil tribe. Fu respectfully bowed to you in the Han manner and said, "I've brought the people on time as promised." You eyed the group, who appeared somewhat disheveled in the night, and asked, "Why bring them so late at night?" Yu Fu smiled in response. "We weren't far from here by evening, and everyone was eager to arrive as soon as possible, so we didn't even stop to eat. That's why we've only just arrived." You knew full well he was just trying to save on a meal, but you couldn't very well say it aloud. You could only usher everyone into the cave first and then instruct Shurtu to quickly prepare food. As the crowd entered the walled courtyard, the first things they saw were the bonfires burning all around, along with numerous wild cattle and alpacas, and a long-nosed, 4-horned creature they had never seen before, as well as countless stone basins and pottery pots. The tribe's people murmured among themselves at the sight, though they weren't particularly shocked. After all, Yu Fu had previously described the Han tribe's situation. By the bonfires, warriors brought pottery pots and bowls, fetched water and added firewood, preparing to cook the cured meat. Among them were several women Yu Fu had brought from near Yi Mountain. An older girl excitedly said to a blind woman, "Auntie, they're giving us meat to eat. Does that mean they won't drive us away?" The woman quickly cautioned her, "We've come to a good place. Tell the younger sisters to behave and not upset the chief." The little girl obediently stared wide-eyed at the pottery pots, swallowing hard. Meanwhile, Yu and Yu Fu sat by the fire, eating roasted meat sprinkled with chili peppers. Yu Fu glanced around and suddenly asked, "Han Chief, where's that ox cart of yours?" "Sent out to transport goods. We only have one. Even if you hadn't come, it wouldn't sit idle. If you're in a hurry, it'll be back in 3 or 4 days. If not, I'll have another one made for you. I'll pay you for sure by next month." Yu Fu thought for a moment and said, "Then I want a new one, just like the last one." You nodded in agreement. "So, these next few days will you stay or go out?" Yu Fu planned to stay and rest for now, but with dozens of his tribespeople here, he quickly added, "We'll handle our own food." The night passed, and a new day began. With the efforts of hundreds of people and livestock, the river digging team had nearly excavated a 750-meter-long channel to a depth of 1 meter. The house-building work was also progressing steadily, with the ridge beams expected to be raised and the roof laid that day. Once this group of builders mastered the process, the construction team could expand. Early in the morning, Yu Fu came to find you. Han Chief, while we wait for the ox cart these next few days, I'd like to find some work to trade for your pottery and white salt. You thought for a moment and told him to continue with his previous task, helping Xiao Dai cultivate horsegrass in the fields. Let's go see the tribespeople who arrived last night. Then I'll have someone take you to the fields. Inside the walled area in front of the cave, 153 tribespeople stood in disarray, each one disheveled and grimy. Your sharp gaze swept over everyone. The tribespeople dared not meet your eyes, and a few children even hid behind the adults in fear. Only one youth with a swollen, red arm caught your attention. He was staring intently at you, his eyes devoid of fear and even hinting at a flicker of fervor. You pointed at him and asked Nyo Fu, "Who is this? What happened to his arm?" Zhou Fu sighed. "This one's a troublemaker. He injured his arm when he attacked his former chief last spring." Hearing this, you smiled. "This little punk is quite interesting." He was equally curious about you. He couldn't understand why such a large tribe was led by a mere kid. If not for his injured arm, he would have definitely challenged you to a fight. You walked over and gently squeezed his injured shoulder. It seemed to be a dislocation, but it could still be fixed. A sharp, piercing pain shot through him, and he hastily took a step back. "Stay still if you don't want to die." You shot him an unfriendly glare, and he flinched slightly. Could this chieftain really have countless followers? But he didn't move his arm again after that. In this state, as long as there was even a sliver of hope for recovery, he was willing to give it a try. You grabbed his wrist with your left hand and gave it a sharp pull, while your other hand seized his elbow. The hand holding his arm suddenly jerked upward. Pain made his eyes widen, but he gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. Then, with a crisp snap, the sound of bones realigning echoed. Suddenly, the pain in his shoulder eased considerably. He immediately shook his entire right arm. Though it still hurt, the arm that had been immobile before could now move again. He quickly placed his right hand over his chest and bowed deeply to you, his attitude full of respect. You gently patted his shoulder and instructed him not to move that arm for the next few days. Then, you found some rope to help him sling it up. When the others saw that you knew how to treat injuries, those with urgent ailments grew restless. Chieftain, please take a look at my grandmother's eyes. She can't see." A little girl with an innocent face raised her hand, calling out repeatedly. The so-called grandmother quickly covered the girl's mouth. "Stop shouting. If the chieftain gets angry, he'll drive us away." You watched this scene with surprise and slowly approached the woman. Her eyes, milky white, stared blankly ahead. Just by the color, it was clear. She had cataracts, and from the looks of it, they had been there for a long time. There was nothing you could do about it. The medical knowledge you possessed was limited to what you had learned in your previous life in the Special Forces. The little girl, whose mouth was still covered by the woman, gazed at you with wide, tear-filled eyes, full of pleading. You ruffled the little girl's hair, then turned and had Yofu tell them that it had been too long. There was no curing it now. But you wouldn't drive them away. The woman repeatedly expressed her gratitude, while the little girl couldn't hold back her tears. Watching this scene, you felt a pang of discomfort in your heart. You proceeded to examine everyone one by one. Out of the 150 or so people, about 100 were from Li Nan's group. The rest were elderly abandoned by their tribes, women who had lost the ability to bear children, and some young girls. Among the men, over 70 were injured or disabled. The rest were able-bodied young men. Your method of resettlement was straightforward. The women would all join the team expanding the horse pastures, the children would stay in the tribe, and the disabled men, those with leg problems, would make bricks. The brickmaking work was stationary, so as long as their hands were functional, they could manage. Those with arm disabilities would drive ox carts, transporting bricks between the kiln and the settlement. The uninjured and able-bodied men would expand the construction team. After this allocation, everyone had suitable work. Even the little girls voluntarily went to gather grass to feed the rabbits. The woman with cataracts went to fetch water for Xiao Dai, helped hold down the alpacas, and kept an eye on the little girls near the pen. With the resettlement of the savages complete, Yofu prepared to take a few tribesmen out hunting. But they didn't dare encroach on the Han tribe's hunting grounds. Left with no choice, Yofu came to you again. At that moment, you were busy arranging for the carpentry group to build four-wheeled ox carts. Upon hearing his request, you suggested he try the other side of the river. It wasn't the Han tribe's hunting territory, and he could go wherever he pleased. In truth, you had your own calculations. In your eyes, this wandering tribe was like an explorer, daring to venture into any unfamiliar place. You also wanted him to scout out the opposite bank. As expected, upon hearing your words, Yu Fu immediately set out excitedly with several men. The remaining women and children of the Yu tribe stayed with the Han tribe to help clear the hemp fields, exchanging their labor for salt. The Han tribe's people were also busy with their respective tasks. Today was the final day of wall building and a critical moment for raising the houses. Under your personal guidance, the group completed 4 small roof ridges by noon. Since the ridges had just been finished and needed time to dry before further work could be done, you split the original 20-person construction team into 4 groups, each joined by 7 newly integrated tribespeople. The experienced workers guided the newcomers, starting with laying foundations as they simultaneously worked on 4 houses. Those without specific assignments continued digging foundations. Meanwhile, preparations for the thatched roofs had to begin early. You gathered over a dozen women from the foraging team, taught them the method for making thatch, and left the task entirely to them. By the time all this was done, it was already afternoon. Finally finding a moment, you hurried to the rice paddies. Nearly 50 days had passed since sowing, and the fields were now a vibrant green. Soon, they would turn golden, promising an endless supply of rice. The thought alone filled you with excitement. Just then, a call came from the direction of the settlement. It was Little Butterfly's voice. You quickly made your way to her. "What's the matter?" Little Butterfly excitedly told you that the alpaca wool she had sheared over the past few days was enough to weave a bolt of cloth. She wanted to start weaving for the tribe as soon as possible. You had seen the tribe's previous weaving method. It was not only inefficient but also produced loosely woven fabric, almost like a fishing net. With the Han tribe's growing population, relying on the old method would take forever to clothe everyone. So, you instructed Little Butterfly to take a few people to wash the wool, assuring her that in a few days, you would teach her a method to weave without using hands. Little Butterfly had never heard of such a miraculous weaving technique. She looked at you with a mix of doubt and curiosity before turning away to prepare for her weaving project. Meanwhile, you racked your brain, trying to recall the structure of a spinning wheel and loom, something you had only seen in a history museum in your past life. Before long, darkness fell. Bonfires were lit throughout the settlement, and the aroma of fish soup wafted from clay pots. The hunting party, led by Yu Fu, returned with their catch, including a boar, a hoofed animal with 2 long tusks, not too large but enough to feed the tribe for the night. Yu Fu happily approached and sat beside you. "The bridge your tribe built is fantastic. I hope we can cross the river here often. Is that all right?" "Of course," you replied. "You're welcome to explore the East Bank. If you encounter unfamiliar tribes, you might trade for valuable goods. When you return, you can trade with me as well." "That's wonderful. Once this ox cart is ready, we'll head to the East Bank for a look," he said, rising cheerfully to take his leave. The night grew deeper, and many tribespeople drifted into sleep. But you remained awake, pondering the method for spinning wool, sketching diagrams on animal hide with a charcoal stick as you thought. Early the next morning, you handed the hide to Mu Tun, carefully explaining the key points for crafting the tool. The parts were clearly drawn, they only needed to replicate them. Usually quiet, Mu Tun couldn't help but ask curiously, "What is this for? Is it another cart?" You chuckled. "No, it's a tool for twisting rope, useful for combing wool and hemp fibers. With this, we won't need to twist threads by hand." The craftsmen were stunned. "Twisting without hands? Isn't that a divine object?" They whispered excitedly, their admiration for their leader growing even stronger. Princess Mu had been busy all morning. Since it was her first time doing this kind of work, her pace wasn't very fast. By noon, she had only just finished the main framework. At midday, everyone took only a short break. Due to the rapid increase in the Han tribe's population, lunch was no longer served. It was estimated that this situation wouldn't improve until the second crop of rice matured in the autumn. However, how much rice could actually be planted in the second season depended entirely on the progress of the paddy field renovation. The river digging team, consisting of several hundred people, had been working continuously for over a week. The river channel had already reached a depth of 2.5 meters. Compared to the initial digging of the drinking water river, the speed was much faster now, thanks to the additional hundreds of workers and the help of dozens of wild oxen. After a short rest, the carpentry team continued their work. Just as you were making the final adjustments to the gear assembly, a member of the Yao Gong team suddenly rushed over excitedly. Reporting, Chief. Our wooden boat has returned. They've brought back a boatload of limestone and over a dozen rabbits. How should we proceed? You stood up immediately and headed toward the riverbank, giving instructions as you walked. Take the rabbits and put them in the rabbit pen. Pull the wooden boat into the drinking water river channel. Understood. I'll find people to do it right away. The tribesman immediately acknowledged the order and ran off. 2 minutes later, you met the wooden boat by the drinking water river. The 4 young men who had sailed the boat back jumped ashore and greeted you. You patted their shoulders to show your appreciation. You've worked hard. After unloading the boat, you'll have to head back. If you need anything, just go and ask the elders. Thank you, Chief. We'll go get what we need now. You nodded and instructed another tribesman to fetch Cripple and bring a few more people to help unload the boat. Chief, what is this limestone for? Cripple asked as he ran over. It's for building houses. Mixing this limestone powder with mud to build houses makes them stronger than using clay, and it's also waterproof. Hurry and find 2 carts and a small wheelbarrow to transport this limestone to the area near the mountain wall. After unloading, I'll teach you how to build a new kiln. Yes, Chief. Cripple acknowledged the order and left. The tribesmen busied themselves with the tasks, and you returned to the carpentry team to complete the final assembly of the scripture copying machine. Once all the rollers and transmission mechanisms were in place, you sat down and tested the foot pedal. Aside from being a bit noisy, everything worked fine. A little grease would solve the problem. With the scripture copying machine fully completed, it was already around 5 p.m. Before you knew it, taking advantage of the remaining daylight, you immediately assigned 2 people a new task, to make another stool. After a brief explanation, the carpentry team began working on it right away. You explained to them, if we make this thing bigger, we'll call it a table. In the future, every household should have tables and stools in their homes. Mu Tun was somewhat surprised. Do we really need to make so many stools? Yes, every person in the Han tribe should have at least 1 stool, and every household should have at least 1 dining table and 2 shorter Kong tables. When it's cold in the winter, people can sit directly on the heated Kong to eat, write, or even sew clothes. There are many uses for them. Once the city is built, you can take your time making more. After saying this, you picked up the stool and called 2 tribesmen to carry the machine, following you all the way to the entrance of your and Xiao Dai's thatched hut before stopping. Just leave the machine out in the open for now. Tomorrow, we'll build a shed and find a proper place for it. Xiao Dai, who had been washing alpaca wool all day, saw you bringing back this strange object and immediately ran over curiously to take a look. You placed the stool in front of the machine, pulled Xiao Dai over, and sat her down on the stool. You guided her to place her feet on the 2 pedals and move them up and down alternately. Xiao Dai suddenly let out an exclamation, "Wow! How do you turn this thing?" You quickly ran to the drying area, filled a large bucket with sun-dried wool, and brought it to Xiao Dai. At that moment, you were even more excited than she was. This was the first opportunity for food. If it succeeded, you'd soon have underwear to wear. Then you patiently stood behind her, guiding her step by step. When Xiao Dai saw the tangled wool turn into a finger-thick strand of yarn, after just a few steps on the pedal, she couldn't stay calm. In the past, completing such a large quantity would have required several people working for over half a month in the border tribe. Overwhelmed, she gave you a quick kiss on the cheek. Now, she had no doubt about your claim that cloth could be woven without using hands. But you knew it wasn't enough yet. The next day, you'd need to make a spinning wheel for twisting yarn. Early the next morning, as dawn broke, Xiao Dai got up, eager to start working. Ever since the first experiment with the spinning machine the night before, she had been impatiently waiting for daybreak. By the time you got up, Xiao Dai was already pedaling the spinning machine, and beneath the yarn board, a woven rattan basket was half filled with spun yarn. Seeing her so enthusiastic and focused on weaving, you shook your head and headed straight to the carpentry group. For the next few days, you'd be working as a carpenter. Besides the spinning wheel, there was also the loom to build. The spinning wheel wasn't difficult to make. In rural areas, many elders could easily assemble one using old bicycle parts. Drawing from your experience making the spinning machine the day before, you designed a single spindle spinning wheel with foot pedal transmission. As before, you sketched the structure on animal hide, handed it to the carpenters, and supervised the assembly. While you were busy, a woman from the fishing team by the river came to report, "Chief, the Li tribe is here again. They've brought 2 trees and a group of women carrying baskets. Should we let them cross the bridge?" "Let them come," Send a team of warriors to escort them to the trading area, you replied. Yes, chief. The woman immediately went to carry out the order. You set down your tools and headed to the trading area. Trade matters required your personal attention. On the way, you instructed your clansmen to bring several large wooden barrels for storing oilseeds. As previously agreed with the Li tribe, 1 full barrel of oilseeds could be exchanged for a large bowl of white salt. After waiting briefly in the trading area, you saw the Li tribe arrive and greeted them warmly. While responding, you inspected the goods they brought. 2 small trees, about as thick as an arm and 4 to 5 meters tall, with smooth grayish-white bark and untrimmed, rounded crowns covered in large, 3-pointed leaves. You recognized them instantly as tongue trees. The women's baskets on the ground were filled with packaged black oil seeds, each about the size of 2 soybeans. Everything was in order. We can proceed with the trade now, you announced. Upon hearing this, Mao Li immediately directed her clansmen to pour the seeds into the large barrels. After emptying all their baskets, the seeds from 20 people filled only 7.5 barrels, with the 8th barrel only partially full. A quick glance told you the tally. You've brought 2 trees and less than 8 barrels of seeds, which can be exchanged for 9.5 bowls of white salt. Would you like to exchange it all for salt, or part of it for pottery? This bucket of seeds can be exchanged for 1 pottery basin or 2 pottery bowls. Mao Li counted on his fingers, struggling with addition and subtraction within 10, furrowing his brow and muttering under his breath. We want 4 bowls of white salt, 5 peach-colored pots, and 2 smaller peach-colored bowls. Is this exchange acceptable? As he spoke, he untied a long snakeskin bag from his waist and handed it to you, clearly prepared in advance. You nodded to indicate no problem, then called for your tribesmen to solemnly count the items in front of Mao Li. The Han tribe leader asked, "Will you need these numbers and quantities in the future?" "Of course, we'll take both numbers and quantities, as many as you have," Mao Li replied, visibly relieved. "That's good. I'll bring another batch in a few days." With that, he hurriedly left with his people. You immediately went to the main road planned in the tribal settlement and found 2 spots suitable for planting trees. You had people dig holes and plant the saplings. The 7 or 8 buckets of tung oil seeds were temporarily sealed away. There was no time to process them for oil yet. It was better to finish the half-built spinning machine first. But just as you returned to the carpentry group, a tribesman ran over with exciting news. The Shuda Li Han tribe was now only half a day's journey away. A warrior had returned early to report. Soon, the warrior named Shushan was brought before you. He knelt on one knee, clasped his fists in a military salute, and reported the results of the attack on the Fire tribe. However, during the return journey, 40 to 50 of the 1,200 assimilated women and children had died, mostly pregnant women. You frowned slightly upon hearing this, thought for a moment, and instructed Shushan to return and slow down the pace. The group didn't need to rush as long as they returned before sunset. After Shushan left, you summoned the elders and Shu Wu, directing the gathering team to build 120 additional thatched huts around the existing ones, following a standard of 10 people per hut. The women immediately set to work, using whatever materials they could find when supplies ran short, bustling with activity. Without delay, you hurried back to the carpentry group to continue working on the spinning machine. Everyone had clear tasks and worked diligently. Once the spinning machine was assembled, you instructed Mu Tun and a few others to make several stools and as many spindles as possible. Then, you carried the spinning machine to Xiao Dai. Xiao Dai was intently using a golden comb to process wool tufts. When she saw the spinning machine you brought, her eyes lit up. You smiled, set the machine down, deftly twisted a woolen thread as a demonstration, and patiently taught her how to thread and connect the fibers. Xiao Dai, being clever, grasped it immediately. Watching the spinning machine start working, she danced with excitement, eager to begin weaving woolen cloth. She just didn't know when you'd finish the loom. You patted her head and said, "The loom will take a few more days, but I promise it'll be ready before those 30-some alpacas are sheared bare." Just then, Shuda and his group arrived at the settlement. Shuda, Beast Tooth, and Blood Disciple approached you. Seeing them, a hint of relief crossed your face. You stepped forward, helped them up, and urged them to rest. Then you called Beast Tooth to prepare food for the evening. Tonight called for a grand celebration. As darkness fell, bonfires lit up the Han tribe settlement. Old and new tribesmen sat together, chatting and laughing, sharing a lavish dinner that included fish and delicious meat soup. Seeing all this, the newcomers to the Han tribe shed tears of relief, knowing they had come to the right place. At that moment, Yu Fu returned from hunting. He found the tribe bustling with unusual activity, the crowd noticeably larger than usual. Puzzled, he stopped a fellow tribesman to inquire and learned that the fire tribe had joined their ranks. Just as he was absorbing this surprise, his eyes widened at the sight of Blood Disciple among them. "Why are you here? Didn't you say you wouldn't come?" Blood Disciple set down his bowl, wiped his mouth and chuckled. "Well, I ran into them while following the fire tribe. The Han tribe's chieftain helped me get my revenge, so I've joined them now. I had no idea the tribe you mentioned was the Han tribe. If I'd known, I would have agreed right away." Yu Fu was stunned into silence for a long moment before finally collecting himself and stepping forward. "Congratulations to you all. The Han tribe has grown so much in numbers." Yu nodded with a smile, then turned to discuss the ox carts with Yu Fu. "The carts are all finished, but you'll need to figure out how to cover them yourselves. Animal hides or thatched shelters will do." Yu Fu waved his hands dismissively. "No problem at all. As long as the ox carts are the same as before, it doesn't matter if they have covers or not." Changing the subject, you assigned him a new task. "I know there are many grazing horned beasts east of the river. If you can locate them, come back and tell me. Also, if possible, I need some horns and sinews from them. Oxhide would be useful too. Besides that, look for edible plants. Ones with holes growing on vines, large-leafed plants on the ground, or even edible roots from the soil. It's best if you can bring them back alive, dug up with the roots intact, or at least with seeds attached." Yu Fu's expression turned troubled. "Those plants are manageable, but even if I find those beasts, I can't bring them back. It seems I'll just have to locate them and report to you." Yu patted his shoulder gently and reminded him, "Not necessarily. If you happen to come across the Yang Beast tribe, you could try trading with them. Isn't that what your tribe excels at?" Yu Fu's eyes lit up as if a new world had opened before him. "That's true. But I'm afraid they might not value what we have to offer." Yu smiled faintly. "Don't worry about that. Before you leave, I'll give you a barrel of white salt. Part of it is payment for helping us plow the fields, and the rest you can use for trade. But remember, if you dare run off with that salt, I will definitely send all my warriors after your tribe. You know I have the strength to do it." Yu Fu's expression tightened instantly. "How could I do such a thing? Our two tribes are forever friends. Han chieftain, rest assured, with this white salt, I'll surely bring back valuable goods for you. We'll set off tomorrow morning." Satisfied, Yu nodded and acknowledged with a hum. The next day at dawn, as the sky began to brighten, Yu Fu led his tribesmen toward the eastern bank of the small river. Riding a horned beast at the front, he guided the way, followed by an ox cart carrying several clay pots and bowls, plus 2 large barrels filled with water and white salt. By mid-morning, the scorching sun bathed the land in heat. The rice had entered the tillering and jointing stage, growing visibly each day. The seedlings, once only about a foot tall, had now reached thigh height. In another 2 or 3 weeks, they were expected to grow taller than a person, given that this wild strain originally reached 2 meters. Meanwhile, you were sketching the structure and components of a loom on animal hide using charcoal. Planning to make looms a household item, one for every family, you decided on a compact design and settled on creating a high-warp loom. The finished animal hide was handed over to the craftsmen at the wooden barrel station. They were also tasked with producing components. Finally, you led them in assembling the pieces. Xiaodai remained seated under the pavilion, beginning another day of spinning work. In this specially designated spinning pavilion, 2 pregnant women brought back from the fire tribe were taken under Xiaodia's wing as apprentices, now learning the craft alongside her. However, the more than 30 alpacas in the pen were having a rough time. One after another, they were being turned into bald alpacas. In their place, rolls of fine brown yarn were steadily piling up. But today marked another significant event. After relentless efforts by hundreds of people, the Huishui River project was nearing completion. Today was the day to break through the final barrier and channel water into the Huishui River. This time, you did not take part in the labor. The remaining work of excavating the Huishui River was entirely handled by the youths of the Ao and Chai clans. With dozens of people working in shifts, the barrier between the Huishui River channel and the smaller stream was gradually chipped away layer by layer. When only 40 centimeters of thickness remained, the loosened soil at the top was the first to give way under the pressure of the river water, collapsing completely in an instant. The Huishui River now had water. Your first decree following this was that henceforth, bathing and washing must be done only in the Huishui River. The northern drinking water river was to be reserved solely for daily drinking water. Violators would be penalized with a day's ration deduction. The clansfolk were puzzled by this order, but no one dared to question it, as they believed their chief could do no wrong. With the Huishui River now complete, the brick-making work, however, was far from over. The excavated clay had already been shaped into bricks and tiles, neatly stacked beneath the thatched sheds, awaiting their turn in the kiln for firing. But firing the kilns didn't require as much manpower, so the hundreds who had been digging the river now found themselves with free hands. They all waited for you to assign new tasks. After a moment of contemplation, you concluded that the most urgent task at hand was still building houses. At the very least, residential housing for 3 districts needed to be constructed, amounting to nearly 300 households, to meet the living needs of the Han tribe's current population of over 2,000. With this in mind, a preliminary plan began to take shape in your head, focusing on the construction of the central district. Previously, you had always envisioned the central district as a square, but paving the entire area as a square seemed wasteful. A district measuring 110 meters in length and width, roughly the size of 2 football fields, could easily spare a smaller half for public facilities, such as a school and your own residence. You planned to place your home within the school grounds, since space was limited and needed to be used efficiently. Speaking of efficiency, modern multi-story buildings inspired you somewhat. Your own house should at least be a small 3-story structure, befitting your status as the chief. A simple plan emerged. The square central district, with 110-meter sides, would be divided along a north-south axis. The northern section would house the school, the southern section would be the square, and at the intersection in the middle stood the chitai, now called the zuki, which would eventually become the national flag. At the very northern end of the central district, right in the center, would be your house, planned to be at least 3 stories high, and no shorter than the school buildings. Centered around your residence, 2-story school buildings would be constructed on the east and west sides, with 4 buildings in total expected to accommodate 3,600 students. The entire district's residential capacity was only about 5,000 people, so these 4 buildings could easily handle all the children attending school at once. Moreover, in the foreseeable future, these 4 buildings might not even be filled to capacity, leaving some floors available for uses such as a library, to preserve the knowledge you would leave for them. With these plans finalized, you began assigning new tasks to the clansfolk who had just finished digging the river. All of them were integrated into the construction team to build houses, starting from the very beginning with your own hands. The original team of 20 construction crews that had been trained had previously been divided into 4 groups of 5 people each. Some indigenous people sent by Fu were added to each group, bringing the total to over 10 members per team. Now, they could simultaneously build 4 residential units at a time. These 4 groups have now been split again, directly divided into 20 teams. The original construction crew members were promoted to team leaders, serving as the core leadership for each group. Indigenous people who had already participated in building one house, along with newly recruited tribesmen, were assigned to the groups as supplementary members. After all, they lacked construction experience and had to start from the basics, laying foundations and building walls. The reorganized construction teams have now expanded to 20 groups, each with no fewer than 20 members. From masons to laborers mixing mud and carrying bricks, and even skilled masters laying bricks and finishing floors, every role is filled. Although some are still inexperienced, they learn quickly, as hands-on practice is the best way to gain expertise. From this day forward, the Han tribe entered a phase of large-scale construction. Residential areas sprang up rapidly, with 20 houses being built at a time. The tribe was bustling with activity and energy, everyone working hard for the tribe's development. A week passed in the blink of an eye. The rice in the paddies had already grown chest-high. From a distance, it looked like a vast green ocean. The peanuts in Jinling's fields were also thriving. Though their underground progress was unseen, the foliage above ground was lush and dense. Meanwhile, the chili plants were covered in small white blossoms. In no time, fresh chilies would be ready to harvest. At the same time, Deshu, far away at Baobao Mountain, was not idle either. Over the week, he sent back 2 full boatloads of limestone, along with dozens of rabbits on board. The lime kiln successfully produced its first batch of quicklime. Seeing this, your heart swelled with joy. By adding the right amount of water, this quicklime could be transformed into slaked lime for construction purposes. Once supplied between the bricks of the houses, it would create a sturdy, waterproof barrier. When enough lime was accumulated, it could also be used to whitewash the interior walls, brightening the rooms with pure white. Around the same time, The Li tribe from the east bank of the small river came to trade twice. Considering the ease of transport, you had previously suggested they trim the crowns of the tung oil trees. This time, the number of tung oil saplings brought by the Li tribe had significantly increased, with 4 to 5 saplings per trip. However, they no longer exchanged them mainly for white salt as before, instead turning their attention to more practical items: pottery pots, clay bowls, and larger water containers. Moreover, after experiencing the great convenience of the bronze axe, Mao Li's desire for bronze tools grew stronger. Filled with anticipation, he proposed trading for bronze tools. Without hesitation, you refused his request. After all, it was precisely these tools that gave the Han tribe a leading edge among the many tribes. To the Han tribe, they were as vital as a lifeline. Seeing your resolve, Mao Li had no choice but to abandon his unrealistic hopes and left with his tribesmen, grateful for what they had gained. In the tribe's industrial development, the processing of tung oil encountered some challenges. You understood the importance of tung oil well. It could effectively protect wooden tools and play a key role in certain specialized techniques in the future. However, extracting tung oil required roasting the seeds at high temperatures first. The tribe's current dilemma was the lack of sufficiently large pots for large-scale roasting. With a resigned sigh, you had to temporarily set aside the plan for tung oil processing, thinking to revisit it after some time had passed. We must cast a batch of suitable copper pots. Just then, Wooden Bucket excitedly ran over to tell you that the weaving loom's construction was successfully completed and now awaits your assembly. With an excited heart, you hurried to the carpentry workshop. Following the pre-drawn animal hide diagrams, in less than 2 hours, you assembled the first weaving loom in human history. Then you called a few strong tribesmen to carefully carry it to the spot where Butterfly usually works. This was no ordinary event. It instantly attracted the attention of many children and women working nearby. Butterfly was also drawn by the commotion and could no longer sit still. After waiting a full 7 days, had you really created the miraculous machine for weaving? You too were eager to try it yourself and teach Butterfly along the way. Once everything was ready, you moved the stool Butterfly usually sat on and settled yourself in front of the loom, placing both feet on the treadles below. Gently pressing them, you saw the hemp cords pull the heddles, causing the 2 sets of warp threads to instantly part. This sudden change immediately captured Butterfly's full attention. Wow! So we don't need to pick the threads by hand anymore? You didn't speak, your focus entirely on the loom. Alternating your feet on the 2 treadles, the heddles lifted the 2 sets of warp threads like agile dancers, quickly rising and falling, opening and closing in rhythm. The rhythmic motion was like playing an ancient melody. Pushing and pulling the beater once, the weft was laid smoothly and without resistance. Picking up the 1-foot-long, 2-finger-wide wooden shuttle from beside you, you slid it into the gap between the 2 layers of warp threads. Pushing it forcefully to the left, the waxed bottom of the shuttle glided swiftly through the warp threads with almost no resistance. Your left hand steadily caught the shuttle and brought it to your lips. Then, with your right hand, you pulled the beater backward, instantly straightening the weft thread and tightly interweaving it with the warp. Lifting your left foot and pressing your right, the warp threads shifted layers rapidly, alternating up and down. Your left hand threw the shuttle to the right side, and your right hand quickly caught it. Your left hand pulled the beater, and a complete weaving cycle was smoothly finished. The women around merely watched this miraculous machine, their eyes filled with novelty and amazement, but their curiosity remained superficial. However, Butterfly, who had woven hemp cloth by hand before, was deeply shocked by the scene before her. She knew all too well how arduous and time-consuming weaving had been in the border tribe. Just the 2 steps you had just completed, alternating the warp threads up and down, would have taken hundreds of breaths in the border tribe, equivalent to several minutes. Yet you had done it in no more than 3 breaths. The difference in speed was simply incomparable. And that wasn't even the most crucial part. As you had said before, this loom was not only fast but could also weave wider cloth, even producing long, continuous fabric. Butterfly glanced at the more than 1 meter wide loom and the roller on it, already wound with dozens of meters of thread. A fire seemed to ignite in her heart, and she stood there, stunned. What would Mother's reaction be if she saw this machine? The tribespeople gathered around were deeply impressed by their leader, who had created this loom, filled with awe and gratitude. Butterfly suddenly looked at you and softly called, "Leader, when I finish weaving the wool cloth, can you take me back to the border tribe to see Mother?" Her eyes were full of hope. Without hesitation, you replied, "Of course. Whenever you want to go back, just let me know." Then, Can I bring a piece of wool cloth as a gift for mother? A smile tugged at the corner of your mouth as you said, no problem. From now on, this wool cloth will be yours to weave. Moreover, our alpacas will continuously produce wool. When treating constipation later, Xiaodai paused slightly, her voice growing even softer. Then could we give one of our spinning machines to AMU? We already have 2 now. Wen Yen, a different light flickered imperceptibly in your eyes as you slowly said, that certainly won't do. Our Han tribe doesn't even have enough for ourselves. However, we could let them come to our Han tribe to use them. Xiaodai tilted her head, calculating innocently. But AMU would have to walk a whole day to get here. Using the loom for 1 day here, then spending another whole day to return. The journey is just too far. You patiently guided her. Could AMU stay here with us? Our tribe has plenty of space. But Xiaodai looked troubled. AMU is the tribe leader. She can't be away from the tribe all the time. Hearing this, you waved your hand helplessly. Forget it. Let's focus on weaving. We can revisit this when we go back to see AMU. Not long after, the elder and Shu Wu hurried over to find you. Chieftain, this evening the wind is extremely strong, and the moon hasn't risen in the east. I'm afraid there will be heavy rain tonight. Shu Wu added from the side. And there's that heavenly fire. Perhaps the moon is too scared to show its face because of it. Hearing this, you immediately began arranging various tasks. Have all pregnant women and nursing children stay in the caves tonight. The others can remain in the grass huts for now. Distribute all the animal hides in the tribe, prioritizing the children and women. Make sure all the livestock are securely tied up. We can't let them get scared and run away. Gather all the metal tools in one place. There must be no wood or kindling nearby, and people should keep their distance. Those bronze objects can attract lightning. Tonight, move all cooking utensils into the caves. The wind outside is too strong. It could scatter the fire easily. If it ignites the grass, that would be disastrous. We'll see to it right away. The 2 old men promptly acknowledged, swinging their arms and legs as they hurried off. Nearby, Xiaodai, hearing you say that bronze attracts lightning, quickly removed the bronze hairpin and bronze hair clasp from your head. You were taken aback at first, but then, seeing the items in Xiaodia's hands, you inwardly felt a pang of alarm. You had almost forgotten about that. Thinking of this, you couldn't help but worry for Big Tree, far away at Babao Mountain. That place was full of metal ores. So you hurriedly found Beast Tooth and sent him off to Babao Mountain the next day to have Big Tree and the others take precautions. By then, everyone in the tribe was busy, some moving things, others preparing food. Before long, dark clouds completely covered the sky, plunging everything into darkness. The wind howled even more fiercely, reaching about 7 or 8 on the scale. Within the clouds above, the year's first thunder was brewing. A low, rumbling roar echoed from the distant horizon. Just as the rain began to fall, a bright flash of lightning, sharp as a blade, split the entire sky. Immediately after, rolling thunder resounded through the heavens. Some of the younger children were so frightened they burst into tears. Even some adults covered their heads with animal hides and huddled trembling in the corners of their grass huts. They were filled with fear of this natural power. The night grew deeper, and the rain continued to fall. Xiaodai curled up in your arms, breathing evenly, murmuring something softly in her dreams. It seemed she was calling for AMU. The child was homesick. Or perhaps she was recalling a thunderstorm from many years ago, when she had curled up in AMU's arms just like this. It was a deep sense of dependence, and now you were her support. Early the next morning, the rain had stopped, and a rainbow hung in the sky, exceptionally beautiful. You hurried to the fields to check on the crops. Fortunately, they were unaffected. You let out a long sigh of relief. Meanwhile, on the south bank of the small river's east side, the oil tribe, having just emerged from their shelter from the rain, was chasing a few wild chickens through the jungle when they unexpectedly encountered the second tribe of their East Coast journey, the Sparrow tribe. No sooner had they met than they found themselves surrounded. The leader of the Sparrow tribe was around the same age as Yufu, both young men under 20. Over 40 men, all armed with bows and arrows, stood ready. However, their weapons looked like children's toys, crudely made, both the bows and the arrows. But numbers were on their side, and the oil tribe members were instantly intimidated. Fortunately, Yofu kept his composure. Seeing that the enemy had only surrounded them without immediately attacking, he sensed there might be room for negotiation. He bowed and beat his chest in a gesture of respect toward the sparrow chieftain, then waited quietly for the other to speak. "Hand over the sparrows you caught yesterday and get out of this area, or we'll kill you," the sparrow chieftain shouted, gesturing loudly as he drew his bow and shot an arrow that landed with a soft thud at Yofu's feet. "Don't attack. It's all a misunderstanding. We're willing to hand them over," Yofu replied, thinking it wise not to fight a losing battle. He promptly produced all the wild chickens they had hunted the previous day. The sparrow chieftain hadn't expected such a swift surrender of the prey and was momentarily delighted. Quickly regaining his composure, he ordered his men to take the goods and began to shoo them away. Yet Yofu showed no intention of leaving. He never missed an opportunity for trade. "Respected chieftain, we can go, but we desperately need this food. Could we exchange something for it?" Intrigued, the sparrow chieftain asked, "Exchange with what? This white smoke is also edible," Yofu said, pulling a small snakeskin pouch from his waist. He opened it to show the chieftain, even pinching a bit to indicate he should taste it. Hesitant to try it rashly, the sparrow chieftain was nonetheless fascinated by the pure, white substance. Yofu sampled a bit first to prove it was safe, and only then did the chieftain cautiously taste it. As expected, the Han tribe's white salt was of excellent quality. After tasting it, the sparrow chieftain immediately agreed to the exchange. Regrettably, Yofu only managed to trade for some food, as he hadn't obtained the specialty items he needed. However, he made an agreement with the sparrow tribe to return for future trades of valuable goods. After bidding farewell to the sparrow tribe, the oil tribe continued southeast, hoping to encounter more tribes and sooner find what they sought. Meanwhile, back in the Han tribe, Xianxia brought news from Dashu at Baoshan Mountain. They were all safe and sound, had even built a house, and with abundant wildlife around, food was no concern. You were puzzled upon hearing this. Weren't they supposed to be mining? How did they have time to build a house? Upon questioning Xianxia, you learned that the dozen or so miners could extract 2 or 3 cartloads of ore a day, but the ox cart round trip took 2 days. The transportation couldn't keep up with the mining pace, leaving them with spare time to improve their living conditions. Dashu also suggested that if the amount of limestone being transported back seemed too little, the carpentry group could build more ox carts, as their mining output could certainly meet the demand. Thus, the carpentry group, which had been fully focused on manufacturing textile machinery, shifted back to building carts. This time, they were constructing 4-wheeled wagons designed to carry more load with less effort. The wheels were widened, and the sides heightened into a deep, steep style to maximize capacity. In the past few days, the carpentry group had made significant progress. With over 20 people dedicated to machinery production and experienced carpenter mutant guiding the construction, their speed was remarkable. In just 6 days, they produced 12 spinning machines for twisting thread, 2 carding machines for coarse yarn, and made headway on the designed vertical prototype looms, one fully assembled and debugged, the other with its frame just completed. Xiao Dai was overjoyed to see the growing number of textile machines. He grew increasingly skilled at operating the loom. From initially producing just 1 meter of cloth per day, he progressed to 2 meters, then 3 meters, and eventually could weave a full zhang about 3.3 meters in length with room for further improvement. In the past, at Bian tribe, producing what he now wove in a single day would have taken 2 to 3 months, and the quality was far inferior to his current work. Yet you showed little excitement, your mind preoccupied with the flying shuttle loom. With a flying shuttle loom, the speed of manual weaving could increase at least 3-fold, as it eliminated the need to pass the shuttle back and forth by hand. By fitting springs on both sides of the shuttle, a single pull of a string would complete the weft insertion. Unfortunately, finding springs became a dilemma. 2 more weeks passed. After over 10 days of diligent effort, Xiao Dai wove at a pace of 10 meters every 3 days, completing the first roll of 50 meters. At Han tribe, the 30-plus alpacas in the pen had been sheared. The shorn wool, after washing, carding with coarse sand, and spinning, had accumulated into a large pile of yarn, enough to weave several hundred meters of cloth. But once this was used up, what raw materials would be available for weaving? This troubled you. The loom couldn't sit idle. New materials had to be found. That evening, as Xiao Dai lay beside you, she tentatively asked, "Could we visit Bian tribe tomorrow to see Mu? I'd like to bring her 2 meters of cloth." Considering there was nothing urgent lately, you promptly agreed, generously promising to gift your mother-in-law 20 meters. The next morning, you set off with Xiao Dai. After briefing Shu Wu and the elders, you rode out on Huishan and Robao. After a leisurely morning's journey, around 1 or 2 in the afternoon, you caught sight of Bian tribe's hemp fields. The women of Bien tribe were harvesting the year's first batch of hemp. Just as you and Xiao Dai appeared near the fields, a sharp whistle sounded abruptly. The women in the fields, hearing it, turned to look in your direction. Two massive creatures were slowly approaching. Terror flashed across their faces. They dropped their tools and fled toward the tribe. The fields descended into chaos. Seeing this, Xiao Dai stood up excitedly, shouting AMU into the distance. The fleeing women halted at her call, turning to look back. They saw Xiao Dai waving frantically from the beast's back, her face radiant with joy. Chang Zuexian, realizing what was happening, her eyes sparkling with surprise and delight, rushed toward Xiao Dai without a second thought. Xiao Dai hurriedly slid down from Hui Shan's back and ran to meet her mother. Mother and daughter embraced in the middle of the hemp field, weeping as they shared their longing for each other. After a long while, Xiao Dai retrieved the roll of woolen cloth from Hui Shan and handed it to Chang. This is cloth I wove from alpaca wool. It's for you. Chang took the cloth, gently stroking it, her eyes filled with awe. It's so beautiful. Xiao Dai smiled and explained. It was made with Han tribe's loom. There are many amazing machines in the tribe. Now I can weave this much cloth in just 6 days. The women of Bien tribe quickly gathered around, gazing enviously at the woolen cloth. Can Han tribe's loom really be that miraculous? Chang asked curiously. You nodded with a smile. The loom truly boosts weaving efficiency. If Bien tribe had one, your weaving speed would improve significantly. I've come this time with an important matter to discuss with you, Mu. Chang looked at you, a premonition stirring within her. Han tribe's leader, please speak. Taking a deep breath, you said slowly, Mu, I wish for Bien tribe to join Han tribe. We can help Bien tribe produce better pottery. Provide not only the loom but also supply white salt, ensuring your people live a better life. Xiao Dai looked at you in surprise. She hadn't expected you to make such a request at this moment. The elders of the Bien tribe also showed expressions of astonishment and hesitation upon hearing your words. However, the hunting captain secretly rejoiced. He had long heard of the Han tribe's strength. If the Bien tribe joined them, they could essentially lie flat without worries. Xianxia felt a mix of joy and concern. He worried that joining the Han tribe would mean losing the Bien tribe's independence. After a moment of contemplation, he said, Chief Han, this matter is too significant. I need to discuss it with the elders and will give you an answer tomorrow. You nodded in understanding and proactively shared the Han tribe's current struggles with insufficient land and food, expressing hope that they could work together to solve these problems in the future. Hearing this, Xianxia felt even more conflicted. He glanced at Xiao Dai, then at the tribespeople around him and said, Chief Han, I would like to visit the Han tribe before making a decision. You smiled, naturally delighted by the idea. The next day, Elder Changhe and the others set out with you on the journey to the Han tribe. Along the way, you introduced them to the Han tribe situation, and Elder Changhe was filled with curiosity and anticipation. As they approached the Han tribe, they happened to encounter a Han tribe hunting patrol. Several members were cheerfully carrying wild boars, preparing to return to the tribe. When they saw your group, they excitedly reported, Chief, we had a great harvest today. We caught several wild boars. You smiled and nodded. Take the boars back to the tribe first. We'll have a feast tonight. Upon entering the Han tribe, Chang and the elders were stunned by the sight before them. A vast square and brick houses under construction. Things they had never seen before and couldn't even have imagined. You led them to a half-built house. This is where our Han tribe members live. Though it's not fully completed yet, once finished, it will have a kitchen and a heated kong bed, making it very warm in winter. Chang stepped inside the unfinished house, admiring the spacious layout with envy. This house is truly wonderful, far better than the ones in our Bien tribe. Next, you took them to a temporary settlement where various textile machines were set up. Xiao Dai excitedly ran to a loom and explained to Chang and the elders, This is the loom I told you about. It's incredibly useful. She then skillfully operated it to demonstrate. Elder Bien stepped forward, carefully observing the loom's operation with awe. He couldn't resist reaching out to touch it. This loom is a treasure. If our Bien tribe had one, our weaving efficiency would greatly improve. Xiao Dai immediately chimed in, Elder, if the Bien tribe joins the Han tribe, we can use these looms together. Hearing this, Elder Bien was deeply moved. He turned to Chang, his eyes full of expectation. But Chang seemed to be wrestling with inner turmoil, unable to make a decision. After all, as the leader of the entire Bien tribe, he had many considerations. Elder Bien, however, could wait no longer. He resolutely agreed to join the Han tribe but insisted that the Bien tribe be provided with identical looms. After saying this, he leaned over the loom and burst into tears, lamenting how unworthy his life had been. If I had such a loom when I was young, think of all the cloth I could have woven in my lifetime. He wept bitterly, his grief profound and heart-wrenching. Seeing Elder Bien's firm stance, Chang could no longer oppose. Yet he still had some unresolved doubts. Chief Han, I can also agree to join the Han tribe, but I don't quite understand. Most tribes had relatively small populations, even if they numbered in the hundreds. They often had to scatter across several settlements. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough hunting grounds to provide food. But the Han tribe has so many people. If our Bien tribe joins as well, can this settlement support so many? You didn't rush to answer. Instead, you took them inside the walls, intending to let them see for themselves, rather than offering empty explanations. The spacious cattle shed was empty at the moment, as it was daytime, and the cattle were out working. However, the alpacas in a nearby shed were still there, as were the thousands of rabbits in the rabbit pens. Though now, more than half were still unweaned young rabbits. This four-legged creature is called an alpaca. They are very docile and they are all grass-eating animals. In winter, they grow long, thick fur, though now it's all been sheared off. The wool we know today is made from their fur. We raise these alpacas first because they don't compete with humans for food. Second, they can continuously produce wool. Third, they can also breed young alpacas. And when they grow old, we can slaughter them for meat. Of course, this isn't the main source of food. Over here, we raise rabbits, which you should recognize, and I'm sure you've eaten them. These are the animals the Han tribe currently relies on to supply meat. They grow extremely fast and have strong reproductive abilities. A pair of rabbits can give birth in just 2 months, and their offspring can mature and reproduce in 4 months. Last winter, the Han tribe captured only a few dozen rabbits, but now they've multiplied into thousands. And all they eat is grass every day. We just need to assign a group of older children to gather grass to meet their food needs. This is far safer and more stable than hunting. Both Chang and Elder Bien were astonished upon hearing this. Although they had seen the Han tribe's farming practices before, they had always assumed it was just for domestication purposes. They never imagined the Han tribe raised such a variety of animals, including some specifically for meat and others for shearing wool to weave cloth. Moreover, the idea you proposed, replacing hunting with farming for food supply, completely overturned their traditional hunting mindset. Chief Han, can you domesticate and raise any kind of animal? Elder Bien asked curiously. Not exactly. We can only raise grass-eating animals, and they must be docile, not prone to attacking humans, and useful to us in some way. For example, they can help us with work, provide meat, or produce fur. We can't raise carnivorous animals, we don't even have enough food for ourselves. Besides, most carnivores are fierce and can harm people. You explained in detail. Then what about those 2 we saw earlier? How did you get them? What are they used for? Elder Xian suddenly remembered something and asked as if prompted by a whim. They came on their own. We didn't capture them. Now, they mainly help us dig rivers and can also be ridden. They're quite intelligent and formidable in fights. They are the guardians of our tribe. You began to fabricate a story. Chang and the elder listened, nodding as if they understood but not quite. Guardian beasts, huh? They sound impressive. Let's go and take a look at our rice paddies. They are also extremely important. With that, you led them outside the walls. The 2 had no idea what that was, so they followed eagerly, driven by curiosity. East of the walls, there are 2 shimmering artificial rivers. On both banks of the rivers are hemp fields and rice paddies. You must recognize that hemp field over there? It's the one we planted this year, you said, pointing to the hemp field on the north bank of the drinking water river. Chang and Xiaodai, who were accompanying you, couldn't help but feel slightly awkward upon hearing this. They recalled the first time they met you, when they had captured you alive. On the other side is the rice we planted. This is something edible, you continued, leading them to the edge of the rice paddy and pointing to a rice plant as you explained. The panicles growing on top are where they flower and produce seeds. Once the rice matures, we collect the seeds. Those seeds are what we eat. The seeds from just this one rice plant are enough to fill an adult for 1 meal. The seeds are called rice. After drying, they can be stored for several years. However, rice is very hard and needs to be boiled in water to be edible. With more water, it becomes porridge. With less, it turns into dry rice. Humans can survive on rice alone. It's our staple food. Chong and the tribal elder were utterly astonished. It was the first time they had learned that food could actually be cultivated. And with what you said, that one rice plant could provide enough for an adult's meal. Wasn't this more stable and reliable than hunting? If rice is so good, why don't we plant more of it? What's the point of raising those animals? Isn't that a waste of manpower? Chong asked, unconsciously switching to we in his speech. Rice is indeed good, but we can't rely solely on it, you replied. Moreover, this rice isn't just for us humans. It can also be used to feed the animals we raise. We eat the seeds while the animals can eat the lower parts of the plant. If we were to burn it all, that would be a huge waste. Besides, the animals' manure can be turned into fertilizer and spread back on the fields, helping the rice produce more and better seeds. As for your question about planting more, that's actually quite difficult to achieve. Rice can't be grown just anywhere. It can only be planted in paddy fields, which must be constantly covered with water. Take these paddies here, for example. They were only created after our entire tribe worked together to dig the rivers and transform the land. Both rivers over there and here were dug by our own hands. The soil we dug up was used to make bricks and build houses. Tang and the elder were so shocked their jaws nearly dropped. Can rivers really be dug by people? They wondered. If you hadn't said it yourself, they would have always believed those two rivers were natural. No wonder they had found the perfectly straight river channels so strange when they first saw them. That river over there was just finished a few days ago. I plan to expand the rice planting area further next month, you said, pointing to the newly dug backwater river. Can we still plant rice this year? How long does it take to grow and produce seeds? The elder asked. From planting the seeds in the soil to when they flower and produce seeds, it takes over 3 months, you explained. We can plant once in the spring when the ice melts and harvest in the first month of summer. Then we plant a second time. If we're fast enough, we can harvest again by late summer. Theoretically, we could plant a third time in autumn, but I'm not sure if we can harvest before winter arrives. This year, planting 3 crops of rice might be a bit challenging. But if we can master the changes in seasons and temperature, and if we're quick enough with each harvest and replanting, theoretically, we could manage 3 crops of rice. By the riverbank, Chong listened intently. The elder was encountering rice plants for the first time. After listening to your explanation, he silently calculated in his mind. A year has 14 months, with 4 months being the cold winter, leaving 10 months suitable for rice cultivation. If one rice plant yields enough for 1 meal, a person would need over 800 plants per year, calculated based on 2 meals a day. If 3 meals a day, it would require around 1,300 plants. With 3 planting seasons, each season would only need 400 to 500 plants. This food source seemed quite substantial. No wonder it was considered a staple crop. But only you knew the truth. Planting rice 3 times a year was nearly impossible. Although 10 months seemed sufficient in theory, in practice it was an immense challenge. Unless, right after harvesting one season, seeds were immediately sown for the next, a tremendously difficult task. Harvesting takes time, and replowing and fertilizing also require time. Just one transition between seasons could take around 10 days, and that was considered fast. 2 seasonal transitions might waste nearly a month. Although a third season could be planted, the rice would not mature before winter, a rather troublesome situation. Still, where there's a will, there's a way. With careful study and minimizing transition times, it might just be achievable. With that, the inspection tour by the 2 senior members of the Bien tribe came to a successful conclusion. They now had a clearer understanding of the Han tribe's situation. The matter of the Bien tribe fully integrating into the Han tribe was smoothly finalized. For now, the Bien tribe would not relocate to the Han tribe, but from this point on, they were considered members of the Han tribe. You would equip them with the same production and daily tools used by the Han tribe. In return, the Bien tribe would supply all the hemp fiber they produced. The initial supply plan involved sending 5 ox carts to the Bien tribe, simple flat carts pulled by a single ox, the same type the Han tribe currently used for transporting bricks. These 5 ox carts would carry tools such as tempered white stone, buckets, red axes, red shovels, and red adzes for production and daily use. Along with 10 spinning machines, the Han tribe's only 2 combing machines and 1 loom. Since all the wool had already been combed and there was no immediate work, these were sent to the Bien tribe for processing hemp. Newer model looms would be supplied later, specialized types designed for weaving hemp sacks. With the rice soon to be harvested, the Han tribe needed many hemp sacks for storage. This became the first production task you assigned to them. After returning, the Bien tribe was to focus entirely on weaving hemp sacks. Specific dimensions, parameters, production techniques, and machinery would be sent later. For now, they only needed to spin hemp thread as much as possible, which was why you allocated 10 spinning machines to them at once. After reviewing all this, evening was approaching. Accompanied by Xiao Dai, the two visitors also toured the carpentry and pottery workshops, which truly broadened their horizons. The Han tribe was far more advanced compared to them. But now that they were also members of the Han tribe, they would soon enjoy these benefits as well. The thought filled them with a sense of pride, a feeling of belonging and identity with the Han tribe. That evening, Chong and the Bien tribe elder enjoyed a flavorful meal with ample salt and chili. Back in the Bien tribe, they had used white salt sparingly. After all, it was a precious commodity obtained through trade, and no one dared to use it freely. Each person could only take a little to taste. It would be too extravagant to sprinkle it on food. The next day, you began making busy arrangements, having your tribespeople prepare supplies for the Bien tribe. Chong and the Bien elder were also diligently learning to use the carding machine and spinning frame. This was the first task you had assigned them, and they had to complete it excellently. Supplies were prepared over the course of a day, and Chong and the Bien elder spent the day learning how to use the various tools. On the morning of the third day, the two set off on their journey home. Accompanying them on the road were 8 ox carts and 10 tribespeople, 8 of whom were driving the carts, while the other 2 were sent by you. These 2 women were among the earliest members of the original Han tribe, tasked with teaching the Bien tribe how to use the supplies, as well as instructing them in the Han language. They were also stationed there as a reminder to the Bien tribe not to forget their promise to the Han tribe, and not to abscond with the supplies, as that would be absolutely impossible to succeed at. Also traveling with them was the Chijiao Road hunting squad, responsible for escorting the convoy safely to the entrance of the valley where the Bien tribe was located before returning to the Han tribe on their own. After seeing off the Bien tribe members, you immediately immersed yourself in the workshop, beginning research on a new type of loom. Your sole focus was to create a loom with a simpler structure, one that could be quickly assembled and disassembled. After all, the tribe would soon need to weave a large number of hemp sacks. With a more convenient loom, efficiency could be greatly improved, better preparing for the upcoming harvest season. Meanwhile, the Yu tribe was traveling along the eastern bank when they encountered the Lu tribe. They saw the women of the Lu tribe herding a group of peculiar-looking spotted pigs back to their tribe. The pigs had colorful, short, glossy fur and round, sturdy bellies, clearly well cared for. Yu Bu, not paying much attention to his surroundings, accidentally fell into a trap set by the Lu tribe, crying out in pain. Yu Fu hurried over to check on him, then stepped forward and shouted toward the Lu tribe, "We are from the Yu tribe, just passing through. We are not here to attack you." The leader of the Lu tribe, Zhu, hearing the commotion, came over with a few tribespeople. He immediately noticed the carts pulled by oxen and deer in the Yu tribe, loaded with plenty of white salt, and his interest was piqued. Seeing this, Yu Fu took the initiative to introduce the concept of intertribal trade and handed some white salt to Zhu, saying, "Try this. The flavor of this white salt is pure and genuine. It's a rare treasure in our region." Zhu took it, tasted it, and his eyes lit up at the savory, salty flavor. He immediately decided to exchange animal hides or other valuable items for the white salt. Yu Fu was inwardly delighted and, after a moment's thought, said to the leader, "I see the spotted pigs your tribe raises are quite interesting. I wonder if we could exchange some white salt for a few to take back." Zhu readily agreed and, smiling, invited them to his tribe as guests to discuss the trade in detail. Upon arriving at the Lu tribe, Zhu enthusiastically introduced the habits of the spotted pigs to the Yu tribe members. These spotted pigs love to eat hat flowers and cabbage, both of which are abundant around our tribe. Moreover, I can give you some seeds and vines to take back and plant, so you can raise the pigs yourselves. Yu Fu and the others found the deal quite favorable. The two sides sat down to negotiate the specifics of the trade. After some haggling, the Yu tribe exchanged a considerable amount of white salt for 2 boars, 4 sows, and a full 50 piglets. Additionally, the Lu tribe sent 10 young, capable women to assist them. They were given more cabbage seeds, wisteria vines, and a good amount of animal hides. The tribe members were overjoyed, contentedly herding the pigs and carrying their newly acquired goods as they set off on the journey back to the Han tribe. Back at the Han tribe, everyone was bustling with activity. They were busy building looms for making hemp bags. Meanwhile, the Bien tribe, as agreed, was enthusiastically setting up their hemp cloth production. The Yu tribe was herding the pigs toward the Han tribe, proceeding cautiously along the way, fearful of any mishaps. The mine was also bustling with activity, with ox carts busily transporting everything seemed to be going smoothly, as if better days were just around the corner. But unexpectedly, danger was quietly approaching. That evening, Zhu Bing and Xiao Yi hurriedly returned to Buwang with over 20 strangers. These people looked panicked and exhausted, their faces weary and bodies bearing wounds. Upon inquiry, it was learned that they were refugees from another tribe. It turned out that their tribe had suffered a terrifying attack. You quickly stepped forward to ask for details. The survivors, still shaken, said, "The ones attacking us were a group of cannibals, along with an exceptionally large and ferocious beast. The beast looked almost human and had astonishing strength. It could send a person flying with a single slap. Many in our tribe were killed by them. Only we managed to escape." Hearing this, your heart sank, and you couldn't help but recall the brutality of the last battle with the cannibals. Not daring to waste a moment, you immediately summoned the tribe's leaders and began assigning tasks with urgency. "Shoya, go notify the Bian tribe at once. Tell them to halt the production of supplies for now. Then, recall everyone mining at Ba Bao Mountain and the ox carts transporting or from the east side of the river. Also, bring back those guarding the boats. We need to strengthen the tribe's defenses. The logging and gathering teams should stay where they are and continue their work. The fishing team can carry on as usual, but assign people to keep a close watch on the surroundings. If there's any sign of trouble, report back immediately." After giving these orders, you initially considered organizing the tribe to harvest the rice overnight. But upon second thought, everyone was exhausted from the day's work. Forcing them to labor now would likely be ineffective and could even lead to chaos. So, you decided to let everyone rest properly. Still, as a precaution, you assigned 100 warriors to stand guard overnight. Meanwhile, you sat in your room, racking your brains for ways to counter the enemy. You knew all too well that among the more than 200 enemies, the cannibals were the most troublesome. You needed to find an open area to engage them, where you could maximize your side's advantages. You also had to figure out how to restrict the cannibals' movements. Using nets or ropes might prove effective. And yes, you could also use quicklime to attack their eyes, temporarily disabling them. Early the next morning, you dispatched 3 groups of cavalry to alert different areas, informing neighboring friendly tribes to take precautions. The rest of the tribe remained in place. Some of the women were assigned to harvest peppers. After all, peppers were an important resource. Others were sent to cut the rice. The men, based on their skills, were assigned to different training exercises. Those skilled in archery went to the riverside, serving both to protect the fishing team and to hunt, replenishing food supplies. 100 strong men were gathered to practice with meteor hammers, essentially stones tied to long ropes. If they could manage to trap the cannibals with these, they would prove incredibly useful. The remaining people practiced throwing short ropes tied with stones. But these were no ordinary short ropes. They were actually designed to launch cloth bundles filled with quicklime at the enemy. You yourself weren't idle either, meticulously adjusting the wrapping methods for the quicklime bundles, striving for optimal effectiveness. After some experimentation, you finally found the ideal wrapping technique and had the women produce 300 quicklime bundles using this method. You also had protective headscarves made to shield tribesmen from harm during combat. The messengers sent out on horseback gradually returned. The group sent to the border tribes brought back 30 large bows, truly timely assistance. The team dispatched to the dark forest returned with a boatload of limestone and, as a bonus, brought back numerous rabbits, making it a fruitful trip. However, the group sent to 8 Treasures Mountain couldn't return that day due to the long journey. Looking at the gathered supplies, you felt a surge of confidence. You decided to take the initiative and eliminate the threat before it could reach the tribe, determined not to let the enemy attack the settlement, as the consequences would be unimaginable. Early the next morning, a 411-strong team set out in a grand procession. The force included archers skilled in long-range attacks, a squad armed with meteor hammers ready to immobilize enemies, a capture team responsible for taking prisoners, a spear unit wielding long spears, and highly mobile cavalry riding deer, among others. Even the refugees who had fled here joined as porters, pulling ox carts behind the procession. The team marched northward until they suddenly encountered a pack of wild wolves. However, this posed no challenge for the well-trained warriors. Working in coordination, they quickly surrounded the wolf pack and, after a brief skirmish, effortlessly hunted them down, securing ample game. This success boosted everyone's morale, filling each person with fighting spirit and confidence for the upcoming battle. By evening, the group arrived at a merchant's outpost. You took a few scouts to survey the area and returned with some refugees from the Qi tribe. It turned out their tribe had also been attacked by cannibals and completely scattered, leaving only these survivors. Moved by their plight, you had the Qi tribe's women and children help prepare meals for the warriors and distributed weapons to the men, integrating them into the battle effort. Among these Qi tribe refugees, one person wore a lacquered leather armor that caught your attention. Upon closer inspection, you found it both remarkably tough and lightweight. You immediately developed a strong interest in this material called Qi grass, thinking that after the battle you must investigate it further. If Qi grass could be produced in large quantities to outfit the tribe's warriors with such armor, it would significantly enhance their combat effectiveness. The next day, you began deploying formations outside the valley at dawn, directing warriors to cleverly conceal themselves behind earthen mounds and distributing the quicklime bundles. Once everything was in place, you led the cavalry to scout the direction from which the enemy might appear. By noon, you finally spotted traces of the enemy near a forest. There stood a group of cannibal warriors, each armed and glaring fiercely, accompanied by over a dozen tall, ferocious cannibal hounds. They had also taken numerous captives. Without hesitation, you drew your bow and fired an arrow. A sharp projectile whistled through the air, accurately striking one of the cannibal warriors. Then he shot another arrow at the food handler. This swordsman had provoked the cannibals. They roared furiously and charged toward you. The cannibal warriors raised their shields and began their assault. Having achieved the objective, he led the cavalry toward the valley, deliberately taunting the cannibals as they fled, ensuring they stayed close behind. They ran like this for an entire afternoon, finally arriving near the valley. He ordered the cavalry to prepare for battle and quickly donned his own protective gear. When the 17 cannibals caught up, furious and aggressive, you immediately shouted, "Now!" The warriors hurled bags of lime at the cannibals. In an instant, lime powder filled the air, forming a dense, white cloud of smoke. Blinded by the lime, the cannibals screamed in agony, thrown into chaos. Seizing the moment, the Meteor Hammer Squad charged forward, using the long chains of their weapons to skillfully split the cannibals' formation, isolating them one by one. The Five Blessings Squad and the Longhair Squad followed closely, working in perfect coordination to trap the cannibals firmly in place before finishing them off one after another. Witnessing this, the tribespeople shouted excitedly, "Revenge is ours! Revenge is ours!" But you refused to let victory cloud your judgment. You immediately called out, urging everyone not to relax. "There are still over 200 enemies waiting for us. We must keep fighting. We must eliminate every last one of them." Hearing this, the crowd roared in unison, gripping their weapons tightly, ready for the next battle. Their momentum was so fierce it seemed they could crush every enemy beneath their feet. But as dusk approached, you led the warriors back to the mountaintop camp in an orderly manner. At the camp, they first washed carefully in the clear stream, cleansing themselves of the day's toil, then began preparing the evening meal. Gathered around the bonfire, the tribespeople skillfully prepared food, while eagerly discussing the fierce battle. Everyone admired the chieftain's tactics, especially the unexpected use of lime powder, though they regretted not having brought more. Just then, the guide from the 7 tribes stepped forward with a grave expression. He spoke to you with concern. "We can't use the same method against the remaining enemies. I clearly saw captured members of our tribe among their ranks. If we fight the same way, our people will surely lose their lives." You nodded slightly in understanding and replied calmly, "I'm well aware. We've run out of lime, and I never intended to kill those enemies anyway." The guide looked puzzled. "Not kill them," you patiently explained. "That's right. Our tribe has endless work to be done. Killing them would be letting them off too easily. I plan to capture them and put them to work for the tribe." The guide still seemed uncertain. "Why rely on them for labor? Can't we manage on our own? Besides, we'd have to use our food to feed them." You sighed softly and elaborated further. "The tasks we need to accomplish are immense. Even with more hands, it's still far from enough. Compared to the labor they can provide, the food we'd spend is negligible. Besides, we won't let them eat their fill every day." The guide listened and nodded, seeming to understand, yet not fully. He knew the Han tribe was large in number, but he still wondered silently. Aside from gathering food and hunting, what other work could possibly need doing? Unable to contain his curiosity, he asked again, "Chieftain, What kind of work does our tribe actually do? Yu replied slowly. Hunting doesn't require so many people. What we urgently need now is building sturdy and durable houses for everyone. These houses must not only provide shelter from wind and rain in summer, but also withstand the biting cold winds of winter. Additionally, we need to dig canals to divert water for irrigation and cultivate various crops. At the same time, we must send people up the mountains to fell trees and gather sufficient firewood and timber. There are simply too many tasks to be done. The guide grew increasingly bewildered as he listened, thinking to himself, I might as well wait until we reach the Han tribe to figure things out. After all, my only concern right now is for my own clansmen. After the meal, you quickly summoned Shu to Shuya, Shuatu, and other tribal leaders to discuss matters. You informed everyone of your decision to capture prisoners and put them to work. Upon hearing this, they all expressed agreement, but the thought of capturing over 200 enemies made them furrow their brows in concern, unsure of how to proceed. Seeing this, you confidently laid out your meticulously crafted plan. The cannibals are traveling on foot, so their pace is bound to be slow. Moreover, they are burdened with many captives. They definitely won't reach the valley today and will surely seek a place to camp for the night. We can take advantage of this and launch a surprise attack at midnight. With the battle plan finalized, the troops quickly assembled. Recalling their previous ambush experience, the warriors remembered that although they had lain in wait for an entire day, aside from a brief skirmish at dusk, they had mostly been resting. Coupled with their recent victory, their morale was now at its peak. Upon hearing their leaders call to take the initiative and capture enemies to put them to work, everyone was filled with enthusiasm. But just then, the first command you issued left your clansmen feeling both novel and amused, even somewhat bewildered. You directed your people to dig a large pit by the stream, then channel water into it to create a pool of mud. Next, you ordered everyone, one by one, to jump into the mud pit and roll around until their entire bodies were coated in mud. Even their weapons were not spared. Each was thoroughly wrapped in a layer of mud. You explained that the purpose of this was to help them blend seamlessly into the darkness, ensuring they would not be detected during the midnight raid. As night fell completely, hundreds of mud-covered Han tribe warriors neatly divided into several echelons and resolutely advanced northward. The first echelon consisted of 30 men. They moved in a fan-shaped formation, carefully scouting ahead to the north, with about 10 to 20 meters between each person. You specifically instructed them that if they discovered any trace of the enemy ahead, they were not to engage but to quickly return and report, then regroup and await the leader's unified orders. The second echelon had 70 men, advancing in 7 dispersed columns. They maintained a distance of about 200 meters from the first echelon at all times, ready to provide swift support in case the first group encountered any emergencies. The third echelon consisted of 100 men, divided into 10 columns, also keeping a 200-meter distance from the second echelon. The remaining 200-plus warriors, along with the cavalry and 2 ox carts, were tasked with bringing up the rear. You arranged things this way because you knew that if everyone marched together, the noise would be far too loud. In that case, they would likely be detected by the enemy sentries long before reaching their destination. The troops advanced swiftly through the night for 3 or 4 hours. As dawn approached, a warrior from the first echelon sharply spotted flickering flames not far ahead. Without a moment's delay, he immediately rushed back to report to the troops behind. You received the news at once. He carefully gazed toward the direction of the firelight. To ensure the accuracy of the intelligence, he then quietly moved closer for a covert reconnaissance. Finally, he confirmed that this campsite was precisely the location of the cannibal tribe they had been desperately searching for. You quickly returned and immediately gathered all the warriors, instructing them to rest briefly in a place where the enemy would not detect them. Then, you carefully selected over a dozen tribesmen skilled in archery and led them as they stealthily advanced toward the enemy campsite. However, you soon realized that this was not the optimal time for an attack. Without hesitation, you led the first and second teams in a swift retreat, successfully reuniting with the main force. After regrouping everyone, you began to wait patiently, knowing full well that the perfect moment to strike would be between 2 and 3 in the morning. At that time, the sky would be at its darkest, and the enemy would be at their most exhausted. The Han tribe's assembly point was not too far from the cannibal campsite. The distance between them was at least 1 kilometer. This distance was just right. As long as everyone spoke softly, the enemy would not hear them, and as long as no bonfires were lit, their position would not be easily exposed. Upon learning this, everyone felt reassured. They fetched water from the barrels on the ox carts to drink and then settled around the carts, either sitting or lying down to rest. However, they never let go of their weapons, even while sleeping, clutching them tightly to their chests. You arranged for Shuda to temporarily take command while you called for Xuetu and the guide from the Qi tribe. The three of you set out once again to conduct a more detailed reconnaissance of the enemy camp. Covered in mud, the three of you moved like phantoms in the dark night, crouching low and cautiously advancing until you reached a spot 200 meters from the enemy campsite. Then, like lurking leopards, you began to crawl slowly and stealthily forward on your stomachs. It took you over 10 minutes to cover those 200 meters. Finally, the enemy was right before your eyes. Most of the cannibals were fast asleep, using their vine shields as makeshift beds laid on the ground, while they slept comfortably beside them. Not far away stood their sharp spears, over a dozen of them propped together. Beside them were only their stone axes, kept close for emergency combat. These people slept soundly, perhaps believing in their hearts that with over a dozen fierce cannibals charging into battle, the enemy would surely be annihilated. It had never crossed their minds that you could lead a counterattack against them. Thus, their defenses were extremely lax. There were no patrols and only 5 or 6 stationary sentries who were dozing off. The campsite housed around 200 people, but the captured prisoners were not kept with them. Instead, they were held just a short distance away, less than 10 meters from the main campsite. A few totem warriors were stationed there on guard duty, and they appeared relatively alert. Perhaps they were afraid the prisoners would try to escape. Among the captives were men, women, and children. When seen earlier in the day, there had been 60 to 70 of them, but now a head count revealed only about 50 remained. Just as you were silently wondering why the number had suddenly decreased, a muffled groan sounded nearby, followed by the sound of intense struggling. Turning to look, you saw Xuetu covering the guide's mouth and forcefully pressing him to the ground. The guide's eyes were wide with fury, tears streaming down his face as he stared fixedly at a totem warrior standing guard. The totem warrior was holding a roasted, stick-like object, gnawing on it with great relish, making smacking sounds with his mouth. Upon closer inspection, the top of the stick-like object in his hand unmistakably resembled 5 human fingers. He was devouring a human arm. Suppressing your nausea and rage, you turned and glared fiercely at the guide, signaling him not to act impulsively. After scouting the enemy's specific defensive layout, the three of you crawled back quietly, just as you had come. Immediately afterward, you began gathering your clansmen, methodically assigning tasks. You selected 50 archers with precise sword skills, ordering them to concentrate their fire on the dozen or so sentries, demanding they eliminate them instantly without making loud noises to avoid waking the sleeping enemies on the ground. Additionally, you dispatched 50 strong warriors to sneak into the enemy camp after the sentries were taken out, stealthily stealing the long spears they had planted in the ground to deprive them of their long-range weapons. The remaining 300-plus warriors lay in ambush around the perimeter. Once the initial tasks were completed, they would swarm in, using 30 large nets to trap the enemies firmly. Those without nets would have to engage directly, with the primary goal of seizing the enemy's weapons to strip them of their means of resistance. The rest would be straightforward, a bare-handed brawl. After all, the Han tribe's warriors outnumbered the enemy nearly 2 to 1 and were armed, making it relatively easy to control the situation. This meticulous scouting and subsequent battle deployment brought the time to around 2 a.m. The large force picked up their gear and launched the tense, thrilling night raid. As before, everyone began crawling on their bellies once they had jogged to within about 200 meters, with the archers leading the way. This time, they moved even slower and more cautiously, as the sheer number of people meant that even slight sounds, when concentrated, could easily be detected. After crawling for over 20 minutes, the hundreds of mud-caked warriors finally reached forward positions within 40 meters of the enemy, though they dared not get too close. Only the archers advanced to about 20 meters away. Equipped with longbows that couldn't be fired while prone like crossbows, the archers waited for your command to stand and attack simultaneously. After another minute or two, the enemy sentries remained completely unaware, and the sleepers showed no signs of disturbance. Seizing the moment, you immediately issued the attack order. You mimicked the crisp call of a cuckoo twice. The enemy sentries, hearing this unfamiliar sound, paused in confusion, wondering what kind of bird it was. They had never heard such a call before. But they had no chance to investigate further. The instant the signal was heard, 50 mud-covered figures rose like ghosts from the grass around the sentries, gripping longbows coated in mud, arrows already nocked and ready. In the next moment, a volley of arrows sliced through the night air, followed by a series of soft thuds, the sound of hits. A dozen enemies fell instantly, each pierced by 3 or 4 arrows, all striking vital areas. Seeing all the sentries eliminated, you stood up and waved your arm forcefully toward the enemy camp. 50 warriors sprang into action, crouching low as they dashed into the enemy encampment, moving with swift agility. Jia swiftly picked up the long spears scattered on the ground and dashed outside, tossing them behind him. The remaining warriors surged forward like a tide, yet the scene remained eerily quiet. No one shouted or clamored for battle. They advanced directly, casting large nets over the enemy's heads, targeting areas where groups of 5 or 6 had gathered. Smaller groups of 3 or 4 were left for the warriors without nets to handle. When the first net descended, the enemies finally jolted awake from their slumber. But as soon as they opened their eyes, their bodies were already ensnared by the large nets. Immediately, a group of mud-covered warriors began kicking and stomping on them relentlessly, eliciting agonized screams. Trapped in the nets, they couldn't break free, and their stone axes were useless in their constrained state. The remaining 60 or 70 enemies who hadn't been netted rose to resist. Instinctively, they reached for their long spears, only to find them vanished without a trace. Left with no choice, they fought back using their stone axes. However, the mud warriors surrounding them wielded long weapons, making it impossible for the enemy to strike effectively with their short-range axes. They dared not throw their axes either, for doing so would leave them defenseless and doomed. In some areas, a temporary stalemate ensued. A few enemies, startled by the commotion, scrambled to their feet and, upon seeing the sudden swarm of foes, lost all will to fight. They turned and fled without resistance, but before they could get far, the mud warriors skillfully reeled them back with precise meteor hammers. Others, more combative, banded together in groups of 5 or 6, fighting desperately with their stone axes. Yet, they were swiftly and mercilessly struck down by a circle of their own kind. Some enemies hurled their stone axes at the Han tribe, inflicting some casualties, but once disarmed, they were quickly overwhelmed and beaten down by multiple mud warriors. The standout performer in this battle was the assassin known as Blood Disciple. Unaccustomed to using the Han tribe's standard weapons, he fought with his trusted long staff. Plunging into the enemy ranks, he moved with ease, his staff striking left and right, sweeping high and low with devastating force. Each blow felled an enemy, though he exercised restraint, merely knocking them unconscious. The chaotic skirmish didn't last long. The enemies were quickly subdued, pinned to the ground, and brutally beaten. Once under control, tribesmen brought ropes and began tying up the captives. Others retrieved the confiscated long spears, chopped off the spearheads with their axes, leaving bare poles. These poles were then placed behind the prisoners' backs, their arms wrapped around the wood with an extra loop around the neck, forming a cross-shaped bind. This ensured they couldn't free themselves, and any struggle would tighten the noose around their necks. After about 20 minutes, all the captives were securely bound and laid face down on the ground. Unable to rise, they lay there, shouting and writhing, but any disturbance was met with immediate beatings. Gradually, the captives fell silent. In the final tally, 237 enemies were killed by arrows, 29 perished in other ways, and 208 were taken alive. These would become the Han tribe's first slaves, bound for life with no chance of ever joining the tribe. Warriors of the Khan tribe in this battle, not a single person perished. Only 5 or 6 sustained minor injuries. The remaining 57 were rescued captives, who were originally members of the 2 previously attacked tribes. After hearing their own tribespeople's accounts, they all gladly agreed to join the Han tribe. After all, with their own strength, they simply couldn't ensure their own safety. Following this battle, the Han tribe's influence grew even stronger. However, deep down, you believed that the greatest gain from this northern expedition wasn't merely the expansion of manpower and territory, but the fact that the Han tribe, through experimental combat, had successfully defeated over a dozen cannibal tribes, discovering an extremely effective tactical strategy for potential large-scale conflicts in the future. This held immense strategic significance for the tribe's long-term development. Moreover, the 2 consecutive victories achieved within a single day acted like a powerful stimulant, greatly boosting the morale of the entire tribe. In these 2 battles, the ingenious tactics you, as the leader, had arranged ensured that your tribespeople suffered almost no significant casualties, undoubtedly elevating your prestige among the warriors to its peak. Of course, there was another important gain that you always kept in mind: the 7 grasses of the 7 tribes, a miraculous plant capable of producing natural lacquer, which held immeasurable potential value for the tribe's construction and development. This, too, must be brought back by any means necessary. The warriors rested on the spot for most of the night. At daybreak, you summoned Xianxia, instructing him to lead the main force back to Brew first. Along the way, he must keep a close watch on the captives, temporarily refraining from providing them with food, only giving them some salt water to drink. Starving them for a few days would leave them with no extra strength to resist. Once back at the tribe, they would be fed only once a day, just enough to keep them from starving. For now, supervision over them should not be relaxed. All further arrangements would be made after your return. Xianxia, aren't you coming back with us? Xianxia asked with a puzzled expression. I need to lead a small group to the 7 tribes. They have a special plant there that is extremely useful to our tribe. I must do everything possible to bring some back and see if we can successfully cultivate it in our tribe. As for the others, take them all back with you. I only need 5 cavalrymen plus 1 guide, that will be enough. We won't be delayed for long. In fact, we might even catch up with you before you even make it back to the tribe. All right then, Chief. Be very careful on the road. I'll keep a close eye on those slaves. Xianxia stood up and bid you farewell with a solemn expression. You nodded slightly in response, then called for the 5 cavalrymen. You mounted your beloved Huishan, while the guide rode Robao, and the 7 of you galloped northward. Soon, you arrived at the former settlement of the 7 tribes. It was an extremely flat and open area, sparsely surrounded by scattered woods and shrubs. Clear animal tracks were visible all over the ground. At a single glance, it was obvious that this was a resource-rich, excellent location. There was an abundance of firewood and grass that could be used as fuel, as well as a variety of animals capable of providing ample food sources. The terrain was flat and open, with the only drawback being slightly poorer security. However, if a fortified city could be built here, it would still be a good choice. The dwellings of the western tribes were uniquely designed semi-subterranean domed earthen huts. Unless one approached closely for a careful look, these structures were not easily noticeable. The 7 grasses the guide mentioned grew among the shrubs. It was a plant with a distinctive appearance. A plant somewhat resembling a sunflower, its entire body displays a fresh, vibrant green. It stands about 1.5 meters tall, with a flower disc the size of a palm growing at the top. However, compared to a sunflower, there are noticeable differences. The center of its flower disc is covered with many tightly closed small holes, inside which its seeds are hidden. A rough estimate suggests there are about 200 seeds, each roughly the size of a soybean. From the outside, it somewhat resembles a lotus seed pod. The 7 grass has a straight main stem, about 2 centimeters in diameter, slightly thicker than a human finger, covered with a layer of fine fuzz. In reality, however, these fuzzes are short thorns that are quite prickly. When you first touched it, you accidentally got pricked, and your finger quickly swelled up. This wasn't due to toxicity, but rather an allergic reaction to the 7 types of gelatinous substances it secretes. The guide from the Xianxia tribe told you that people in their tribe, after prolonged exposure, no longer experience such reactions. This left you feeling somewhat helpless. It seems that in the future, when your tribe collects 7 grass, they'll have to endure quite a bit of pain. The main stem of the 7 grass also bears many large oval leaves, dark green in color, each about a foot long. The backs of the leaves are covered with bumps resembling toad skin, and inside these bumps is precious raw lacquer. Curious, you used your birdbeak knife to gently make a cut on the main stem. Instantly, a thick, white gelatinous substance slowly began to ooze out. The flow was relatively slow, but over time, a considerable amount could be collected. A single 7 grass plant can yield about 300 grams, which is already quite impressive. But there was even more surprising news. The guide excitedly explained to you that after harvesting the branches and leaves of the 7 grass this way, it takes only 7 days for it to restore its original reserves. So when can we start harvesting each year, and how many times can we do it? You asked, your eyes sparkling with excitement. As soon as it flowers, you can start harvesting. When the bumps on the back of the leaves swell up, that's the sign it's ready. The 7 grass blooms in early summer and can flower continuously for 2 months. As long as it's in its flowering period, it will keep producing these precious branches and leaves. By midsummer, the flowers gradually wither, and about a month later, its seeds mature. At that point, the closed holes on the flower disc will open automatically, and the seeds will pop out on their own, falling to the ground where new grass will quickly sprout. By autumn, it can mature once more. Its seeds are edible, though the taste is somewhat peculiar. People in our tribe generally don't eat them, but many large birds and small rodents are quite fond of them. We often use its seeds in the winter to set traps, and we often managed to catch some prey. The guide detailed the characteristics of the 7 grass for you, and you were utterly amazed. It matures twice a year, adding up to 4 months of flowering. It yields about 300 grams of leaves every 7 days, and over 2 seasons in a year, that's 120 days of harvest time, allowing for 17 harvests. Calculating this way, 2 seasons would yield around 75 kilograms, and that's just from 2 plants. The productivity of the 7 grass is simply incredible. Even more astonishing is that its seeds are edible. Though the taste isn't great, they can be used to feed poultry and livestock. After all, feed is an indispensable resource. The Han tribe in Luoyang raises red-tailed black chickens. Wouldn't feeding them these seeds be perfect? Once the seeds are converted into muscle, won't they ultimately end up in people's stomachs? By the way, do you still have the 7 grass seeds? You asked with hopeful anticipation. Yes, but we don't have many left. They're in those earthen huts. I'm not sure if they've been damaged. I'll go look for them right away, the guide replied before hurriedly heading to the huts to search for the seeds. The western tribe had previously suffered an invasion by cannibals, and some of the earthen huts had already collapsed. So, you quickly organized people to help with the excavation. Under the guide's direction and careful identification, everyone worked together and eventually unearthed many black, spherical seeds that looked like large black holes. After much effort, they were gathered together, weighing about 50 to 60 gene. By the time the seeds were collected, evening was gradually approaching. Seeing that it was getting late, you decided to spend the night there. The group immediately got busy again, gathering firewood and grass from all around. Some even took bows and arrows to hunt nearby, soon catching several pheasants and rabbits. With that, they had ample food for the next 2 days. At dinner time, as usual, you took out the white salt and began sprinkling it on the food. When the guide saw the white salt, he suddenly told you that he had seen something like it before. This surprised you greatly, and you wondered to yourself, could there be a salt mine nearby? Where did you see it? You asked. From here, walk 5 days toward the direction of the rising sun. You'll need to swim across a river, and on the other side, there's a fairy lake. The stones by the lake have this stuff, though the white salt there isn't as white as yours. The lake water is also salty, the guide explained in detail, describing a salt lake. Is there really such a thing around here? Then why is that salt lake called Fairy Lake? Is it just because it has salt? You pressed further, your curiosity about the unknown surroundings growing stronger. Not just that, the guide continued. The Fairy Lake is guarded by many wild beasts, and there are also many horned herbivores. Moreover, above the lake, there's a small floating mountain. You analyzed this carefully. Guarded by beasts, that probably means many animals go there to drink the salt water, since animals need salt too. As for the floating island, salt water has high density. If there are relatively lightweight rocks, it's possible they could float on the salt lake. That could somewhat explain it. But when you asked about the specific details of the floating island, the guide's words left you utterly stunned. That floating island is suspended in the air, not far above the water. There are also many very sturdy vines by the lake that grow all the way up to the island, holding it firmly in place. The elders of our tribe say that if it weren't for those vines holding the fairy island down, it would fly away and drift in the sky. Are you fucking kidding me? You thought to yourself, over and over, recalling the physics knowledge you possessed. That place must have a massive magnetite deposit. So, there's a huge piece of iron or that, due to geological activity, separated from the ground. Then, through the principle of magnetic repulsion between like poles, it was repelled by the main or deposit below, lifting it off the ground. The vines then held it in place, preventing it from being flung away, allowing it to float in the air. If this hypothesis were true, it would be a breakthrough, a super-large magnetite deposit beyond human comprehension. Magnetite can contain up to about 72% iron, making it suitable for direct steel production. To be able to lift an entire small mountain, what an enormous or vein that would be. The thought alone was exhilarating. Lost in this wonderful fantasy, you stood there in a daze. Dali, noticing your absent-minded expression, cautiously asked, "Chief, what's wrong with you? I want to go see that fairy lake. There might be things we need there, and plenty of them." Wiping the drool from the corner of your mouth as you snapped back to reality, you said, "Is what we need white rock? But don't we have that back in our tribe? Why go so far for white rock?" Dali asked, puzzled. "It's not white rock," you replied, a smug grin spreading across your face, like that of a nouveau riche who just struck it rich. "It's something that can hold that floating island up in the air." "Something that can hold a floating island in the air?" The cavalrymen were stunned, their jaws dropping in disbelief. The guide, who hadn't quite understood, listened as Dali explained it to him again. Even then, he stared at the guide incredulously. Having only joined the Han tribe 2 days ago, he knew little about your past accomplishments. But now, hearing that you actually understood the reason the island floated, he couldn't help but regard you as if you were an immortal. Is what you're talking about the vines growing beneath the immortal island? He asked. Are those vines holding the island up, not just anchoring it? But what use would we have for those vines? It's not the vines, you clarified firmly. It's the small island floating in the air. That island is likely one massive rock, a type of or we desperately need. If it's real, we must obtain it. Your resolute tone startled the others around you. Is it really that important? One of them wondered. You sound like you're ready to risk your life for it. What kind of, or is it? Could it be more valuable than our copper? And it's so far away. Do we really have to get it? Dali, still struggling to grasp your reasoning, pressed. If it's real, then we absolutely must have it? That ore is called iron, you explained briefly. It's also a metal, but it's harder to smelt than copper. However, it's lighter and stronger. If you strike a piece of iron against bronze, the bronze will shatter. Iron? There's really something that powerful? Dali exclaimed in amazement. I always thought bronze was the best, sharp enough to split a hair. And you're saying iron is even better than bronze? Of course, you affirmed. Iron isn't just stronger, it can be made into many things. The only problem is it's much harder to work with. Unlike bronze, which can be melted and cast directly, iron is extremely difficult to melt. You have to hammer it relentlessly. But we must produce iron. It will make our tribe stronger. That evening, after some brief thought and discussion, you made a decision. You sent one cavalryman back to the tribe with over 50 pounds of chitzao seeds. Once he returned, he was to plant the seeds immediately. Since it was still early in the season, they could yield a harvest this year. The planting site was set to the west of the city. It wouldn't take long, as there weren't many seeds. Early the next morning, you set out with the remaining 5 people toward the immortal lake. With such a small group, there was little chance of a significant haul this time. This trip was more about scouting the area, preparing for a future, larger expedition. Heading east from the 7 tribes, the terrain remained flat. The once dense western woods had thinned out considerably, with trees few and far between. In their place stretched vast grasslands and patches of shrubs. The surrounding ecosystem had changed dramatically. The most common creatures now were yellow-furred ground squirrels. They stood guard in groups on the grass, vigilant for any sign of danger, ready to dart into their burrows at the slightest disturbance. There were also swift gray hares, cautiously grazing while staying alert for sudden predators, like the hawks circling overhead. Strangely, though the sky was filled with eagles, they seemed entirely uninterested in the small animals below. While you were still puzzling over it, an eagle suddenly swooped down rapidly. Its target, surprisingly, was an adult antelope. But after the eagle dove down, it grabbed the antelope with just one claw, then soared into the sky with the bleeding antelope, turning and heading east into the distance. Damn, that can't possibly be an eagle, it's at least a giant eagle or something. Its carrying capacity is so strong. It can actually lift an antelope? That's just insane. But you quickly regained your composure. After all, this is the primitive world, nothing too unusual about it. Then, the group continued walking until evening, settling by a small stream to spend the night. The surroundings were still vast plains, and only near their destination could they faintly see small hills on the horizon. When the moon in the east rose above the horizon, you finally spotted a small black on the moon's surface. That must be the island floating above the lake. You could already see its shadow. Early the next morning, the 6-person team continued advancing toward the rising sun. By noon, an unexpected discovery piqued your interest. It was a pile of dried feces, large, with bits of grass inside. You deliberately halted the team, then used a small stick to poke through the droppings, observing carefully. Inside were partially digested grass fragments, and the pile weighed about half a pound. This was the feces of a large herbivore. Soon, based on the animal tracks nearby, you roughly deduced that if it wasn't a horse, it must be some kind of smaller bovine. But that wasn't important. Whether it was a cow or a horse, you wanted to capture one and bring it back. The Han tribe was severely lacking in livestock. The surroundings were still endless plains. Aside from rabbits and groundhogs, there were only small antelopes. No traces of cattle or horses could be seen. But you weren't worried. These animals also needed to consume salt, so they were likely to appear near the salt lake, which aligned with your destination. So it was best to keep moving forward. By a little past 4 p.m., the group was blocked by a river. This was the river the guide had mentioned earlier. On foot, it would take about 3 days to travel from the western tribe to here, but this time, since you were all riding, it only took a little over a day. The river was about 17 to 18 meters wide. You couldn't determine whether this river might be the same one next to the Han tribe. If it was, that would be ideal. If there really was iron or here, it could be quickly transported to the Han tribe via this river. It seemed that on the way back you could follow the river to scout the route. This river is so wide. How do we cross? Dolly from the team looked at the river and asked you. You should ask our guide about that. The Chi tribe has been to the salt lake to collect salt. They must have crossed here before, right? You first reminded Dolly, then turned to ask the guide. In the past, we always swam across this river. It's not particularly deep, we can swim across. I'm just not sure if the mounts we're riding can swim across. By the way, Chief, can you all swim? The guide explained to everyone, ending with a question for you. Of course we can. Our tribe has a river too, and we often bathe in it. As for these mounts, don't worry, they can all swim. We can all make it across. But you just said you used to swim across here before. Does your tribe go to that salt lake often? You asked. Not really. We usually go once in the summer and once in the autumn. Each time, we need at least 10 of the tribe's strongest adult warriors to go and collect salt. One harvest had to be enough to feed the tribe for half a year. Because the journey was too far, and near that sacred lake, there were fierce beasts with long tusks. It was unsafe with too few people. Even with a group of 10, sometimes people still died there, the guide replied. Dolly listened to the guide's explanation, then looked at the 4 or 5 people beside him, appearing somewhat hesitant. Chief, should we still go? Should we come back next time with more warriors? Are you scared? We'll definitely bring more people next time, but we're going across this time too. After saying this, you were the first to lead Gray Mountain into the water, swimming vigorously toward the opposite shore. It was the height of summer, and the weather was extremely hot. Soaking in the river, you felt instantly refreshed. So comfortable. The river was clear, and you dove straight to the bottom, reaching down with your hand to test the depth, about 5 or 6 meters deep, similar to the deep end of a swimming pool. Meat Bun and Gray Mountain, those two were natural water lovers. They lingered in the river, unwilling to come out, sticking their noses in the water to blow bubbles with a gurgling sound and using their snouts like water guns, spraying everywhere. Dolly gritted his teeth and led his own Corner into the water as well. While crossing the river, he held tightly to Corner's neck. This guy seemed a bit afraid of water. The others also entered the river one after another and swam to the opposite shore. The group rested by the riverbank for a while, waiting until Meat Bun and the other one had their fill of fun, then continued eastward. The terrain on the eastern bank had changed again. Trees became more numerous, but overall, it was still a plain dominated by grasslands and shrubs. However, the land in the distance began to rise gradually, with hills starting to appear. The giant eagles reappeared in the sky, still flying eastward. It seemed these giant eagles lived near the salt lake ahead. The distant guidepost was faintly visible. According to the guide, if traveling on foot, it would take less than 2 more days. You estimated that, at a human walking pace, if focused solely on traveling, 2 days' journey would be about several dozen kilometers, roughly 50 or 60 li. If the path was easier, it might be even farther. Evening soon arrived again, but just as you began searching for a campsite, suddenly, a very loud and unpleasant beastly cry echoed through the air. Hearing that awful sound, your heart sank halfway. You had hoped to find a herd of cattle or horses, but instead, you ended up encountering this. However, things didn't unfold as you had expected. When you saw the creature making that unpleasant noise, you and Dolly, along with the other cavalry, froze on the spot. To be precise, that thing should be called a horse. It looked quite suitable for riding, but you showed no sign of happiness. Instead, the corner of your mouth twitched involuntarily, because what stood before you was a herd of zebras. What kind of beast is that? It looks like the blue horse people you captured before. Should we catch some to use as mounts? You gave them a strange look. Is your taste that peculiar? You actually want to ride zebras. But after thinking it over carefully, the Han tribe really needed mounts badly. Finding horses at all was a stroke of luck. With that thought, you made up your mind and said, "Catch them?" Of course we'll catch them. Our tribe can never have enough livestock. The more we catch, the better. At the very least, we'll be able to plant more rice. But we can't wait until next time. Let's bring more people then and try to capture this entire herd of wild zebras. For now, let's set up camp quickly. Use crushed stones to start a fire. I noticed those zebras seemed to be running away earlier. There might be beasts nearby. Everyone, stay alert. The few people with you acknowledged and began lighting a fire to prepare dinner. Soon, wisps of cooking smoke rose straight up into the sky. Smoke is highly conspicuous in open terrain. Your campsite was quickly spotted by those giant eagles, who then reported to their masters, the eagle tribe living on the salt flat. They specialized in breeding falcons to assist in hunting. At that moment, a group of sharp-eyed and sharp-to-lone giant eagles descended one by one onto the salt flat, carrying prey of various sizes. Miyazuka is back. He had caught a small horse. A young boy, only 8 or 9 years old, retrieved his eagle. Looking at the miniature horse it had brought back, he happily boasted to his chieftain father. The term Azuka he used was the eagle tribe's collective name for all the eagles they raised, indicating that he, too, was growing up just like you. You should encourage him more. Give him the best meat from today's hunt first, said Rue, the chieftain of the eagle tribe, to his son. Yes, father, the boy replied, immediately setting to work. With a stone knife, he skillfully gutted the miniature horse, feeding the entrails to his eagle. He also gave about half of the horse's meat to his eagle, keeping only the forelegs, a small portion of the meat, and the horsehide for himself. The relationship between the tribe's people and their Azuka was not one of master and servant but more akin to friendship or brotherhood. Since Azukas had long lifespans, often living to 50 or 60 years, they could accompany a person for a lifetime. Typically, one person and one eagle would stay together for life, a bond even stronger than any unwavering love. As the boy watched his Azuka eat, he carefully groomed its feathers. Then, turning his gaze to the sun sinking below the horizon, he wondered, why hasn't Bazooka returned yet? It's almost dark. The Bazooka he referred to was the eagle revered by Chieftain Rue and the most formidable eagle in the tribe. No sooner had the boy spoken than a commanding eagle cry echoed from afar. The eagle tribe's Bazooka had returned. This was no ordinary eagle, its feathers were pure white. Bazooka had returned late today, but the prey it brought was immense. A python over 10 meters long. The snake's head had been utterly shattered by Bazooka's sharp beak. Instead of landing, Bazooka swooped down to a low altitude, dropped the python, and then soared back into the sky. It circled several times in the air, let out 2 loud cries toward the west, and finally landed on the salt flat, waiting for Rue to distribute its share of the food. Father, what did Bazooka say? Bazooka circled 6 times and cried out twice toward the west. That means 6 people are coming from the west, probably here to gather salt from the lake. Nothing to fuss about, Rue explained to his son as he expertly divided the food. Father, will there be any girls among them this time? You little rascal, you're not even as tall as an Azuka yet, and you're already thinking about girls? The chieftain playfully smacked his son's head, laughing as he scolded him. The boy rubbed his head and chuckled but didn't argue. Tomorrow, let Bazooka see if it can help those people gather salt. Otherwise, the fanged creatures by the lake will surely eat them. It's not easy for them to travel this far just for salt. Okay, I'll send my Azuka too. The boy nodded vigorously. The next day, the massive Bazooka indeed went to assist you. It circled overhead as your group traveled, guiding your way. Follow that white eagle, the guide said to you. It will lead us quickly to the salt lake. Why is this eagle here? Did it come specifically to guide us? You wondered, filled with doubt. It must be an eagle from the eagle tribe. They often help those who come to gather salt. Perhaps they spotted our campfire smoke. Knowing we were heading to the immortal lake, they sent an eagle to guide us. Although doubts lingered in your heart upon hearing this, you had no choice but to trust for now. Under Bazooka's guidance, your group's pace noticeably quickened. By morning, you spotted the zebra herd again. They seemed to sense danger from above, stirring restlessly. With only a glance at the zebras, you pressed on toward your destination, for the silhouette of the floating island now clearly loomed ahead. It resembled an inverted hill, hovering silently above the salt lake. From afar, it exuded a mysterious and alluring aura, as if concealing countless hidden secrets. Your heartbeat quickened. This expedition was about to reach its critical moment. Whether the floating island held the vast iron or you hoped for would soon be revealed. Gazing at the floating island so close at hand, you felt a surge of anticipation. But just then, a pack of striped hyenas began stealthily approaching. Bazooka let out a sharp cry from the sky, instantly putting you on alert. You swiftly ordered everyone to prepare for battle while circling the salt lake. The group immediately complied, drawing their weapons and standing ready. The 20 or so striped hyenas followed at a steady pace, their eyes fixed intently on the alien beasts, poised to attack at any moment. Yet they seemed somewhat wary, as in the past, whenever they attacked humans, eagles from the floating island would disrupt them. While keeping an eye on the hyenas, you asked the guide about the surrounding area. "Are these the only carnivorous beasts here? I haven't seen any others," the guide replied. "Besides these hunchbacked hyenas, there's a group of large-fanged beasts, about 4 or 5 of them. But they aren't here today." Dolly, curious, chimed in. "Are the fanged beasts the ones with long teeth, short tails, and yellow fur like tigers?" The guide nodded gravely. "Yes, those are the ones. A single swipe of their claws can kill a person. Even the eagles in the sky might not be a match for them." Hearing this, you decided to deal with the hyenas first and then thoroughly survey the surrounding ground. Seizing the moment, you shot an arrow at a striped hyena about 60 meters away. The arrow struck a large hyena's head, but perhaps due to its thick skull or a poor angle, the bronze arrowhead only grazed the bone, embedding itself in the hyena's scalp. Enraged by the pain, the hyena bared its teeth and charged. Fortunately, Bazooka was quick to act, diving from the sky and flipping the hyena over with a claw, leaving deep gashes on its neck. You swiftly knocked another arrow, this time aiming for the hyena's upper body, the chest cavity housing vital organs like the heart and lungs. With a whoosh, the arrow pierced the air and lodged deep into the hyena's chest. The beast collapsed instantly, motionless. Urging Huishan to keep moving, you maintained a distance of about 100 meters from the hyena pack, keeping them within your range. In quick succession, 4 more arrows flew into the pack, and 2 hyenas fell on the spot. Unexpectedly, the hyenas turned on each other, frenziedly fighting over the corpses of the 3 fallen pack members. Seizing the opportunity, you ordered another volley. 5 more arrows shot into the pack from 80 to 90 meters away, felling 2 more hyenas. The chaos among the hyenas intensified as they fought even more fiercely over the spoils. The 8 tribes in the sky also came to join the excitement. With a swift dive, he snatched up a hyena and brought it back to the floating island, dropping it in front of Chief Rue. Rue stared at the hyena corpse with an arrow embedded in it, his face full of curiosity. In the past, people who came here would quickly gather salt under the protection of Bazooka, then leave immediately. It was rare to see them fighting beasts. But this group was different. Not only were they not collecting salt, they were also wandering aimlessly around the salt lake. Moreover, Rue had never seen weapons like theirs before. Thinking of this, Rue suddenly shouted to the circling Bazooka in the sky, "Bazooka, take me down to have a look!" Bazooka let out a long cry, and Rue leaped up abruptly, gripping the eagle's claws tightly with both hands. And so, the man and the eagle descended from the floating island. By the lake, you were still leading your people, patrolling the outskirts of the hyena pack, occasionally firing a few arrows. Suddenly, a massive shadow swept across the ground, cast by giant eagle wings. You looked up and froze in astonishment. The eagle was clutching a person in its talons. Hanging beneath Bazooka, Rue was equally surprised. He had assumed these people were here to gather salt, but seeing them in person, he realized he was mistaken. These individuals were actually riding on the backs of wild beasts, holding strange weapons, as if they were hunting hyenas in a coordinated manner. The hyenas, under continuous attack, stopped fighting over their fallen companions and began to scatter and flee. Seeing this, your group started chasing the hyenas. However, since it was difficult to use longbows effectively on deerback, the accuracy of their volleys was very low. Only 1 out of every 5 arrows hit its mark. They were wasting too many arrows this way. As the hyenas were about to escape into the distance, you made a quick decision and ordered everyone to abandon the chase, turning back toward the salt lake. Along the way, you made sure to collect the arrows that had fallen to the ground. Before long, you encountered Rue by the salt lake. He, too, was collecting arrows from the corpses. Meeting his gaze, you gestured and asked, "Is that eagle yours?" Rue, equally curious, held up a feathered arrow and asked, "Are these short feathers yours?" You nodded and said, "Yes. Please return those arrows to me. Rue held the exquisitely crafted bronze arrowheads in his hand, reluctant to part with them. Such fine weapons. I've never seen anything like them before. Could you give me one of these? You glanced at Rue and scanned the surroundings, thinking to yourself that there was no one else around. This person must have come down from the floating island. After a moment's consideration, you said, "All right, I'll give you one." Thrilled to have gained such a treasure, Rue happily returned the remaining arrows to you and asked curiously, "Your weapons fly fast and far. Is it because of the feathers attached to them?" "My bazooka also flies fast and far because it has feathers." Listening to his words, you repeated the word bazooka. Rue explained, "It's the eagle raised by our tribe. Bazooka is the most powerful one." You were utterly astonished. "Does your tribe live on that floating island?" "Yes. What about you? Aren't you here to gather salt? Why are you hunting instead? The meat of those hyenas isn't tasty." You pointed at the floating island and said, "We're not here to hunt or gather salt. We only came because we heard there's a small island floating in the sky here, so we specifically came to see it." Hearing this, Rue immediately grew alert. "That island is our territory." "You can't." You quickly interrupted him. No, you misunderstood. I'm only here to look for a kind of stone that makes the island float. It has nothing to do with you." Rue was stunned by these words. His tribe had lived on the floating island for generations, yet they never knew why the island floated in the sky. They simply regarded it as a divine land where sacred eagles resided. Now, hearing that you were searching for the stone that made the island float, Rue grew intensely curious. After saying this, you led your people to search the surroundings. Dali and the others remained on their deer, keeping watch around you. Chief Rue ordered Bazooka to fly into the sky and stand guard. I followed closely beside you, watching unblinkingly as you searched for stones. The next moment, on a large, pale white rock by the lake, you discovered peculiar patterns resembling a fish. Carefully brushing away the salt powder on the stone's surface, the skeleton of a fish clearly appeared before your eyes. This was likely the fossil of a deep-sea fish, similar to a ribbonfish. How could a deep-sea creature appear on land? You pondered, speculating that this land had likely risen from the ocean floor in the past, which would explain the high salt content in the soil and the formation of the salt lake. Yet, the iron or you had been longing for still eluded you. We watched you intently, staring at the stone, and asked curiously, "Did this stone make the island fly?" You shook your head and said it wasn't this one, then stood up to continue your search. The main component of magnetite is Fe3O4. After exposure to sun, rain, and air erosion, it transforms into hematite, Fe2O3, which appears as deep red rust. The soil here was iron red, and you were certain it contained iron. However, what you were looking for wasn't just that. After millions of years, even if magnetite existed, its surface would have surely turned to rust. You needed to dig deeper. You selected a spot where the ground appeared particularly red and began digging with the birdbeak pick and your long-haired companion. It was arduous work, and you cursed inwardly, thinking that once you smelted iron, the first thing you'd forge would be an entrenching tool. The entrenching tools from your past life were just too useful. Seeing you start digging, Dali came down with his bronze axe to help. After much effort, the two of you finally dug a pit 1 meter in diameter. Beneath the red topsoil, a layer of white stone appeared, slightly yellowish in color, without texture or glassy luster. You knew that white stones with a glassy luster near salt lakes were usually natural soda, but this wasn't it. This was mirabilite, which often coexists with iron or... You took the yellowish-white stone to the lake, dug a small pit, scooped some lake water into it, and placed the stone inside. The stone quickly dissolved, releasing a white mist above the water, and a layer of frost formed around the small pit. This was the principle of mirabilite refrigeration. Although you hadn't found magnetite, you were excited to have discovered mirabilite. This meant you now had the raw material for making explosives in the future. The Han tribe would no longer have to worry about a shortage of ingredients for explosives, and you could use them to accomplish much more. Dali watched from the side, puzzled, and asked, "This stone in your hand isn't the iron ore you mentioned, is it? Why did it dissolve in water? And why did the water turn so cold?" You explained, "No, this isn't iron ore. It's mirabilite. You've seen it before, the white powder I had the women boil from the soil in early spring. But this substance is very useful. Next time we come, we can gather more. Remember this place. I'll have you lead the team next time." Hearing that you would let him lead, Dali immediately began scrutinizing the surroundings with great seriousness, as if imprinting the location firmly in his mind. After confirming the white stone was mirabolite, the two of you continued digging in the pit. Rui watched curiously from nearby, never having known that such miraculous stones lay beneath the soil here. You dug for a long time and the pit was already over a meter deep, yet you kept finding mirabolite and the reserves seemed substantial. You decided it was time to stop and try another spot. Armed with your tools, you walked a few hundred meters away from the salt lake and found an area with red soil and sandy gravel on the surface. There you began digging again. The ground here was hard, making the work even more strenuous than before. But persistence paid off this time. With one swing of his axe, Dali cracked open a stone the size of a fist, its color a dull iron gray. Quickly, you brushed away the sand and debris covering it. Hefting it in his hand, it felt heavier than ordinary granite. The broken satin surface had crystalline patterns, the cross-section was smooth, and under the sunlight, it shimmered with a faint metallic luster, as if coated with a layer of grayish-golden sand. You excitedly said, "This is it. This is the stone." It was a lodestone. Dali, however, was somewhat puzzled. "Is this iron or? It doesn't seem as sturdy as our bronze." I smashed it with one swing of my axe. "Chief, are you sure you're not mistaken? Could it be some other kind of stone?" Rui, standing nearby, said skeptically, "Such a small stone can make an island fly? That's unbelievable." You patiently explained, "You were able to break it because it's still a stone, so its hardness isn't high. What's truly strong is the iron inside. Can't you see the metallic sheen on the stone's fractured surface?" As you spoke, you handed the ore to Dali for a closer look. After examining it carefully, Dali realized it was just as you described. The stone's cross-section indeed had a metallic luster. Then something strange happened. Just as Dali was about to hand the two halves back to you, as soon as he loosened his grip, the two pieces suddenly flipped over on their own, clamping his palm in between. Startled, both Dali and Rui jumped back. You laughed and said, "Ha! Don't be afraid. It's not alive. This is just the magnetism of the lodestone. Here, try flipping it over and see. Can the broken edges join back together?" Dali did as instructed and found that the two halves indeed couldn't be rejoined. An invisible force kept them apart. Even if he forced them together, the moment he loosened his grip slightly, the two halves would instantly spring apart. But if he flipped one of the stones over, the two halves would attract and stick to each other. Rui, curious, took the stones and tried it himself, equally captivated by this magical phenomenon. Seeing their astonishment, you said, "It's this stone that makes the island float." Rui still didn't quite understand. You stood the two halves upright and said, "Imagine the bottom half is the earth, and the top half is the floating island in the sky. Wouldn't that make it possible?" Then you broke a small twig into 4 pieces and fixed them around the bottom half of the lodestone.